local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 24th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now with some scattered light rain. It's 2 degrees in Ottawa, 3 degrees in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Mayor Jim Watson in Ottawa calling on residents to be vigilant and use common sense when it comes to COVID-19.
Mayor Jim Watson says it's important residents are vigilant to ensure there are no more lockdowns. This comes as Watson says wastewater levels are on the rise once again, while other indicators are expected to fluctuate over the coming weeks. The mayor explains he would have liked the province to maintain its masking in some higher-risk settings longer than indicated.
We don't have the jurisdiction legally to overturn a provincial order. So we have to rely on people's goodwill, that it just makes common sense. If you're going to go into a crowded bus or a train, you should probably be wearing a mask, not only to protect yourself, but to protect others.
Watson adds the future of COVID is unpredictable and reintroducing some provisions might be necessary down the line. Alex Gouge, City News.
City News time, 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We still have some rain and drizzle at times, though, and a gusty wind out of the east today. The high 6 degrees. Some areas may get a bit warmer than that. Tonight, cloudy with more light rain, a low 3. For today, the high 6.
And right now with scattered light rain, it's 2 degrees in Ottawa, 3 degrees in Smiths Falls. Ukraine's president is trying again to encourage NATO countries to do more to help push back on Russia's invasion of his country.
A sharp message from Ukrainian President Zelensky Thursday as he addressed the leaders of all 30 NATO member countries and asked for help against Russia's attacks. Zelensky telling the NATO leaders the only thing he demands after a month of war is to never say the Ukrainian army doesn't meet NATO standards. A senior Biden administration official said Zelensky notably did not repeat his request for a no-fly zone and did not request NATO membership for Ukraine. Karen Travers, ABC News.
Now, the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg opened the summit by acknowledging the bravery of the Ukrainian people.
We pay tribute to the great courage of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian armed forces fighting for their freedom and their rights. We also recognize those in Russia who are bravely speaking out against the war.
Now, Russia's invasion was launched 1 month ago. Ukraine's president is calling for demonstrations around the world to take place today to show solidarity with his country. The United States has just announced it will take up to 100,000 Ukrainian refugees. So far, 3.5 million people have fled that country. City News time, 9:02. Just heading out for a bus, make sure you grab some cash. If you still have a change jar around your place, OC Transpo tweeting a problem with the payment system today. So the technical difficulty is with the ticket machines. Debit and credit payments are not working this morning. You can still pay a fare on a bus, but it is cash only. Canada is on the verge of qualifying to play in the World Cup of men's soccer. The men's soccer team just has only made it to one World Cup in history, and that was back in 1986. They failed to even score a goal in the 3 matches they played against what was then the USSR, also Hungary and France. Canada will be in, though, with a win tonight against Costa Rica. The game will be on Sportsnet. Pre-game at 9:30. The kickoff is at 10 o'clock. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's got the news and the views.
He's got views on the news.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
You ever have one of those days? Doesn't matter how early you get up, you're still running behind? Yeah, today is one of those days for me. Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show. City News. Boy, busy day around here. We're all over the big news stories of the day. We're covering the news. We're getting your views on the news because that's what we do around here. Hey, coming up, public transit in focus for us again today. Gosh, there are so many things to talk about on the public transit file. There is a meeting of the Transit Commission next week, so we're trying to get ahead of it this morning here on the Rob Snow Show. And there are a couple of motions on the agenda. One of them is from Councillors Meehan and Brockington. They want the federal government to come to OC Transpo's rescue again because they say federal public servants make up a large percentage of riders of OC Transpo, or at least they used to. They don't anymore because so many of them are still working from home and their return to work is, that plan is very much unknown. What is that going to look like? When will it begin? So these councillors want the federal government to offset the operating deficit of OC Transpo. They want the federal government to offset the operating deficit of OC Transpo. They claim that that's a big part of the reason why there's a deficit at OC Transpo in the first place. So their thinking is, you made it, you clean it up. The federal government should cover the deficit. So we're going to get into that and this idea of free transit. Free transit. Yes, I'm using the air quotes. Okay, free transit. Councillor Menard wants to get the city staff busy studying the feasibility of free transit. Free transit for those in, quote, grade school and secondary school. Free transit in clogged corridors such as Bank Street and universal free transit. Free. If only everything was free. It'd be like we're living in Star Trek. Free transit. Yeah, free transit. I love that. I had a nice chat with the Auditor General of Ottawa yesterday about transit issues. She shared her concerns about the electric bus plan for the city of Ottawa. Those buses are not free. About $750,000 each. And the Auditor General thinks the city is buying too many of them too soon. She says the city should continue testing the ones that it already has. Okay, it has 4 of them. Collect all the information the city should be collecting and then move ahead conservatively. Okay, have a conservative plan for buying electric buses. The city of Ottawa has budgeted about $55 million. $55 million for 74 electric buses and plans to start buying them in as soon as 4 months from now. So we're going to get into that and phase 3 of LRT. That's supposed to get light rail further west into Kanata and eventually out to Barhaven sometime in our lifetimes with another multi-billion-dollar price tag. But very little idea of where the money is going to come from because the city doesn't have the money and will not spend the money. And it wants upper levels of government to build the whole thing, to fund the whole thing. So lots to chat about, and we will with the chair of the Transit Commission. City Councillor Allan Hubley happens to be from the Kanata area. So that's coming up in just a few minutes from now. And then it's Ontario politics this week. 70 days, David. 70 days. That's it. 70 days. And then there were 70 days. 70 days to go until Election Day in Ontario. And what is the buzz now? Well, the buzz is what's going to happen if the Doug Ford-led Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario doesn't win a majority government. It ends up with a minority government. Will we see a Liberal NDP coalition or a Liberal NDP supply and confidence agreement like we saw in Ottawa? If Ford's party, the PCs, if they don't win enough seats to form a majority government, I think the magic number is 63. Are the Liberals under Del Duca and the NDP under Andrea Horwath, are they going to play nice and come to an agreement a la David Peterson, Bob Ray back in the 80s? And they'll get together and they'll boot the Ford team out of there and they'll run the show. That's all the buzz now, given what happened here in Ottawa this week, and the deal between Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh that means no federal election until the year 2025. So we will get into all of those fun and games. Right now, according to the polls, I don't think Doug Ford should be losing any sleep at night. Right now. Yeah, he should not be, wandering the hallways at night worried about a progressive liberal NDP coalition here in Ontario. We had a poll out this week from Ipsos, Daryl Bricker at Ipsos. And if you're a progressive conservative or a progressive conservative supporter, I mean, there's a lot to like in that poll for you. That poll had the PCs province-wide up by 10 points over the Liberals. PCs 38, Liberals 28, and the NDP in third at 25. The PCs polling ahead with men and with women. And where it matters most, okay? And we all know this. Here in Eastern Ontario, we get this, okay? It's the GTA that will decide the election, and it will be the 905 that decides the election. The vast suburbs of Toronto, in those areas, outside of the 416 area code, the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario is ahead by the Liberals by 26 points in the suburbs, by 26 points. 26 points ahead in the 905 means it could be an early night, okay? June 2nd, this might not even be some nail-biter election. But we'll talk about that, too, because the only poll that matters, the old line, the only poll that matters is Election Day. Ontario politics this week, coming up right after the 9:30 news. Every Thursday, we take a look at the latest international news. Russia's war in Ukraine remains the biggest story in the world, and the center of attention today is Brussels. NATO leaders meeting. Mr. Trudeau there. He will be doing a news conference, not during our show time, at around 12:30, I believe, our time. U.S. President Joe Biden there, of course. And there could be some news coming out of that meeting, specifically dealing with any assistance that China may be offering to Russia, what NATO is calling deterrence and defense. Every Thursday, we're lucky to have the insight of Professor Elliot Tepper, Distinguished Senior Fellow, Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. He'll join us at 11:30, walk us through all the latest developments. A lot of people here on the home front are wondering, what's going to happen to our budget for national defense? NATO has a spending target, a target. It's not mandated, and we don't meet it, not even close. But if you're a member of NATO, the goal is supposed to be you spend 2% of your GDP on your armed forces. For Canada, that would mean spending $40 billion a year on national defense. We don't come close to that. We spend about $27 billion a year. And now, just given what happened in Ottawa this week with this coalition, it's not a coalition. Don't call it a coalition. It's a supply and confidence agreement. But given what happened, this deal between the New Democrats and the Liberals, is an increase, a big increase like that in defense spending really in the cards, along with spending on new social programs like pharmacare and dental care? And can the Defense Minister, Anita Anand, convince the Prime Minister to spend an extra $13 or $14 or $15 or $16 billion? And where would you put that money? Where would you get the most bang for the buck? You should read Tristan Harper in the National Post on that today. And we'll do the talkback hour as we always do during the Rob Snow Show between 10 and 11 o'clock. Want to get your take today on the carbon tax. The carbon tax. 1 week from tomorrow, first day of April, the carbon tax goes up by 25%. Okay, $40 a ton to $50 a ton. That means, yes, your gas prices will go up again. That's going to be tough for a lot of people, okay? Already feeling squeezed, already tapped out because of the rising cost of living. Now, the government has always said, the Trudeau government has always said, you get all the money back, okay, through the rebate program, the climate action incentive, okay? The government insists, maintains, could cite you chapter and verse, you get all the money you pay in a year in carbon tax, you get it all back at tax time. And for some people, you even come out ahead. Even after paying the carbon tax, you will actually have more money in your pocket because of the rebate. Best tax ever. So, 2 questions. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? Do you think you get more back? More money back? Because of the carbon tax rebate than you paid in carbon tax throughout the year? And what should happen with this planned increase of the carbon tax that's scheduled to take effect next week? So 750-1310 on that right after the 10 o'clock news. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's so important, and I know I do come on and I talk about this a lot, but every 60 seconds somebody in Canada needs blood, and so it's important to keep reinstilling the message of donating and continuing to get new blood donors to come into our system to support. We have 1 in 2 Canadians who are in need of blood at any given time, but only 1 in 81 people actually donate. So we need to improve those statistics.
Yeah, and helping to improve those statistics, you guys are always coming up with new campaigns, and you've got a new campaign now. Tell me about the campaign.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm happy to. It's kind of about Canadians. We sacrifice everything for people we know and for people we don't. Canadians show up for other Canadians, and we do this out of the goodness of our heart. And right now, especially right now, through the pandemic and, the winter months and the snowstorms, we've had a lot of canceled appointments. We've had, a decline in the number of people who are able to show up for their appointments. And right now, what we really need is for everybody who's eligible to hear the call to show up for patients. So patients in Canada need blood. We want you to show up. We want you to say we're here for you. And with currently only 4% of Canadians who donate blood, we want more people to show up and improve those numbers and really make sure that the hospital patients are comfortable and that they know that blood will always be there for them when and where they need it.
Yeah, and Jan, you mentioned the pandemic, right? And that probably, as you said, had it's one of the biggest reasons why people perhaps have stopped. But you do have health and safety protocols, and we want to encourage people and let them know that those health and safety protocols remain in place. Let's talk a little bit about those.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, our workforce, our volunteers, everybody who works within the blood donor clinic is fully vaccinated. And we have many wellness procedures throughout, step by step. If you donated through the pandemic, you'll notice the distancing, you'll notice the wellness stations, the health checks at the front end, some more eligibility criteria, as you can imagine. But all of it is just to make sure that the experience itself is safe and reliable. And now we need people to come in and go through that process with us so that the end outcome, again, is that lovely unit of blood going to a hospital somewhere to help a patient.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
And 1310 AM.
At next week's meeting of the Transit Commission, there's a motion from Councillor Meehan in Brockington calls on the federal government to cover the deficit at OC Transpo because of lost revenue related to federal public servants who are still working from home. To talk about this and other transit-related issues, we are joined this morning by Kanata Area Councillor, Chair of the Transit Commission, Allan Hubley. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Great to hear from you.
Thank you for inviting me to join you again.
So what do you think of this motion from your colleagues at the Transit Commission on having the federal government fill any operating deficit at OC Transpo?
Well, the question I'm going to have about the motion at the commission is going to be, how does this impact what currently is in place? Because currently the federal government makes us whole on OC Transpo. Like, they're covering all our losses due to the pandemic, and not just the losses due to the public servants not returning to their workplaces. So I need to find out from the mover who's going to cover that other part of the money, like from, say, students and people that work in other places besides the federal government that aren't using OC Transpo because of the pandemic. Who's going to cover that? Is there a plan to put that on the municipal taxpayer?
Okay. It says, be it resolved, the mayor write to the federal minister of finance, president of the Treasury Board, federal minister of the environment and climate change, MPs, the NCC, requesting the federal government provide funding to offset the operating deficit of OC Transpo as a result of the decision to maintain the work from home model. So your worry is that right now you're being made whole, but if this goes ahead, maybe the OC Transpo wouldn't be made entirely whole, but maybe it would only cover the operating deficit responsible as a result of civil servants working at home. That's your concern?
Yes,
okay.
It's letting changing it so that the municipal taxpayer has to pay for it, which is, there's only one taxpayer, Rob, as we both know.
I understand
but
that.
It's different when it's the federal tax base that's paying for it. That's a much bigger pot of money, and it wouldn't mean the exact same dollar for dollar if we turn it into municipal tax dollars having to pay for it. It would be much higher. There would be an increase in your tax.
But nevertheless, Councillor, how often should the city be going back to this the federal government, and keep asking the federal government to fill budget shortfalls at OC Transpo? Shouldn't it be the work of the city council? Should it not be the work of the management of OC Transpo, the Transit Commission, to align the budget for OC Transpo with the ridership levels of OC Transpo?
Well, the problem is we were in the middle of a pandemic for 2 years, but as you know, during the last budget debate, that was discussed that, we have those Plan A, Plan B, Plan C's for what we have to do if the funding isn't there for it. But this is now turning into like a longer term situation. Like we're not hearing a clear indication from the Treasury Board that the workers will have to be going back to their jobs. So if they're not going back, that means we have to take another look at our whole system and say, okay, what can we afford to deliver based on the amount of money that we have? And so there's several efforts going on there, one of which is a letter that the city had already sent. I think it was done based on a motion by Councillor McGuinty and seconded by me, where the mayor wrote the federal government looking for the feds to pick up the operating costs of public transit instead of the municipal tax dollar. And that way, if they're paying for it all, well, then we don't have to worry about the budget piece each year because you're going to get a fixed amount of money and you can only deliver the services that amount of money pays for.
Okay.
So that's one option. The other option would be to change reduce the number of routes, the number of trips within a route, all that kind of stuff, make those, and they would be significant cuts if we had to go that route. And that's obviously not anybody's preferred choice because, as you know, there are people that use public transit and don't have other options.
I have a few more things I want to get to. The transit budget for 2022 was based on an increase in ridership of 82% of pre-pandemic levels. 82%. Now, some of us thought you're all dreaming in Technicolor with that number, 82%. Here we are. We're almost 3 full months into the year 2022. What's ridership now?
They're going to report out on that at the commission meeting. We should get an update on what the ridership is. It's certainly increasing. It's not at 80%. I don't want to spoil.
Would you say it's 50%? Would you say it's 50%?
But I'd be shocked if it was 80%.
Would you say it was 50%?
Well, now you want me just to guess, right? And if I gave you a guess, I would say it's probably somewhere between 30 and 50, I would think at this point.
Between 30 and 50. Okay. How realistic do you think it is it will be anywhere close to 82% by the end of the year?
It's all tied to what the federal government does, Rob. So I can make a guess at it for you, and you can make a guess at it, but the only one that'll be able to help us get a real good estimate is the federal government with their employees. Now, I know there's talk out there that there's a lot of employees that are finding it's just as productive to work from home, and that's great. But let us know what you're doing. Okay. Right now, we don't know, and so we can't plan for it.
You want clarity. You want clarity from the federal government. Yeah,
more
you want clarity
from the federal government answers all your questions, and certainly answers OC Transpo's questions on how do we go forward here.
All right, let's talk about something else.
Sure.
Electric buses. The city has 4 with plans to buy 70 more this summer. Right. I had a long conversation with the Auditor General of Ottawa yesterday. Issued an early report into this procurement, as you know, is worried that you're rushing this. City Council, doesn't have all the information that it should have from the pilot project. It's a very expensive procurement.
Yes.
What is going to happen with it? Is the plan still to buy 74 buses this summer at a cost of roughly $55 million?
Okay, so if you remember back when this was decided a little more than a year ago, the offer from the federal government to cover the funding for this was they will cover everything over the cost of an existing diesel bus. So they're taking all the risk on this, and it was an offer for whoever goes first to the table. So that's why we had to take this. I raised the same concerns as the auditor's raising in that, we didn't have a good experience with hybrid 1.0. So obviously there's concerns about going to 2.0. How's that going to work? We know it can't work on our long routes. They were upfront with us on that. We're trying to do pilots this winter, but last I checked, there was only one of those 4 buses on the road. The other one was being used for training, and I can't remember what was going on with the other 2. But at one point, we were down to 1 bus on the road. So I'm not even sure this pilot is going to give us the information that we would really want to have before making that decision.
Is the city going to buy 74 buses this summer or not?
Yeah, we have to.
Really?
Under that agreement with the feds.
That's unbelievable to me.
We have to convert as quickly as possible.
You don't have to do anything. Nevertheless, okay.
To get the funding, Rob, let me put it that way. To get their funding for it, for them to cover all the risk in this for us, we have to go ahead with the orders.
Okay. Your council colleague Sean Menard also, this was a motion that was deferred from the meeting in December. Have staff determine the scope, approximate cost, timeline for a study to examine the effects of various fare structures on transit ridership, including free transit for the month of December 2021, because again, this was deferred. Free transit for those in grade school, secondary school, free transit in clogged corridors such as Bank Street, and universal free transit. Do you think that can be done? Free transit.
Well, it can be done if the federal government picks up the tab for the entire transit system. That's a separate debate and issue that'll have to be looked at, but it may possibly be the future of transit. That we have to acknowledge that. So it's something that will get looked at. Staff can't do that right now. That's a huge undertaking to try to get that study going and get them all the answers now. I think what Councillor Menard is looking for, certainly when I hear him speak to things like this, he wants that information for the next term of council because he thinks the next term will be much more willing to raise taxes for taxpayers and fund these programs.
Okay.
Because really, if it's free, nothing's ever free, Rob. You know that. I've heard you say that.
Yeah, I said
Somebody
that 10 minutes
has to
ago.
pick up the tab.
Yeah.
And in Councillor Menard's world, it's a municipal taxpayer will end up with the bill for transit, which the estimate staff gave us on that was it was going to be an increase of something like $500 or $1,000 a year in everybody's property tax.
Okay, finally. There's still no firm funding agreement for Stage 3 of LRT for Kanata, Barhaven. The city wants it to be entirely funded by upper levels of government.
Right.
But just given the status of public transit right now, post-pandemic, is that a project that is still worth the money? What's your opinion?
Well, I want to see some of these reports that are coming back now. Like we've got several different reports that are and independent companies that are looking into the system now that are going to report back. I'd like to see those. Certainly, the system isn't a citywide service unless it reaches the suburbs. Like 1/3 of your population is Kanata and Barrhaven. So if we don't have a system that connects to Kanata or Barrhaven, then we don't have a great system. So I don't think we can stop at phase 2 and call it a success by any means. But at the same time, I wouldn't go today to the federal and provincial government and say, okay, give us this amount of money because we're ready to build phase 3. We're not ready to build phase 3. We've got to get those answers. We may have to do some modifications to what we're doing, but we are going to be ready to do phase 3. I wouldn't take it off the table by any means.
Okay. Very generous with your time. Lots going on in the transit file. I don't envy you. Thank you again,
Anytime,
Councillor Hubley. Bye-bye. Chair of the Transit Commission, Allan Hubley. The news coming up. City News.
One for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 24th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now with some scattered rain. It's 2 degrees in Ottawa, 3 degrees in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news this hour. Ukraine's president has told Prime Minister Trudeau and other NATO leaders meeting in Brussels his country is waiting for some real action. President Zelensky called out the military alliance for failing to do everything possible to help Ukraine defend itself against Russia. A problem on OC Transpo with their payment system this morning, credit and debit not working at machines, so boarding the bus requires a cash payment. Ridership level estimated to be between 30 and 50% of pre-pandemic levels at the moment. The budget, though, for transit is based on 82% ridership. Transit Chair Allan Hubley says there is no way way to tell what will happen the rest of the year. He feels it's up to the federal government and their call on whether downtown workers return to the office or continue working from home. It's an uphill battle for a 13-year-old girl still recovering from a hit and run in the middle of February. Serena Summers struck near the intersection of Meadowlands Drive and Fisher Avenue around 4 in the afternoon. Her mother says she has suffered a bit of a setback in hospital, running a fever today, keeping her in hospital for the time being. We'll have more on this story for you, including the suspect vehicle police are looking for at 10 o'clock. City News Time, 9:34. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time for Ontario Politics This Week. Lindsay Maskell is back, Liberal strategist, former advisor to Premier McGuinty. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi there. Andrew Branders, vice president with Crestview Strategy, former advisor to the Ford government. Good morning, Andrew.
Hey there, Rob.
Hope everybody's well these days.
No complaint.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay. How about a Made in Ontario Radical Socialist Coalition, to borrow a turn of phrase from Pierre Poilievre? Now that the Radical Socialists have teamed up here in Ottawa with this supply and confidence agreement between Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Singh, could the same thing happen in Ontario if Doug Ford and his PCs don't win a majority? They're already talking as though it's in the cards. This is a little bit from the question period yesterday in the Ontario legislature.
So can the Premier and his minister explain to the people of this province why they oppose the deal that will help people with their health care, help people with their dental care, their prescription drugs? Why don't they think Ontarians deserve to affordably obtain those things?
Woman House Leader. Unless I'm mistaken, there is no actual deal in front of the provinces with respect to the things that she talks about. And that's just like the NDP. They'll sign a deal before they've actually even seen it, Mr. Speaker. But we shouldn't be surprised, Mr. Speaker. We shouldn't be surprised. This is the same NDP that is now looking to form a coalition with the Liberals. You can just imagine it, Speaker, can you? I can just see it here. The Leader of the Opposition, the Leader of the Liberal Party, sitting around the illegal pool that the Leader of the Liberal Party built in conservation lands in his backyard, sipping a pina colada, the Leader of the Liberal Party saying, I didn't know you like pina coladas. The two of them thinking about, look at the success that we had in the past. $78 billion worth of debt they accumulated the first time, $140 billion of debt they accumulated the second time. Hundreds of thousands of jobs fled the province of Ontario, Mr. Speaker, but all of that changed when the people of the province of Ontario elected a strong, stable, progressive...
Holy cow. That's Paul Calandra for the Ontario PCs. My goodness gracious, it sounds like Ontario was a hellscape under the previous Liberal government. But nevertheless, this is all the buzz now because of the agreement that's been reached between Trudeau and Singh that will see the New Democrats support the Liberals until the year 2025. What do you think, Lindsay? Could the same thing happen in Ontario if it's not a PC majority?
Well, every time I see Paul Calandra in the House, I remember his antics when the Globe and Mail said that to call him a clown is an insult to the ancient art of face-painted buffoonery. He is just, this is a bit of just distraction for the Conservatives wanting to say that this will bolster them. Any kind of arrangement like this, of course, as you remember, pre-election, there was no discussion of this. In fact, the NDP were very clear about who they wouldn't work with if there was a minority government situation again. So, it would be far too difficult when Andrea's campaign has solely been an attack on Stephen Del Duca for her to switch course and start to pretend that there would be a plan to work together, because there's not. I think that all three parties are going to need to take a strong plan to the people. Mm-hmm. And, think about it. On March 10th in 2018, Doug Ford still wasn't the leader. So a lot can happen in a very short period of time. And I think you have to see how an election plays out, and also to see each other's platforms, right? So this is an agreement based on some plans and ideas that the Liberal government in Ottawa believe are a good idea and would like to implement. And so without anybody's plans in places and an election not having happened, I think it's just a chance for the Conservatives to try to poke that, why, are the Progressives just one and the same? Because certainly NDP voters and Liberal voters don't feel that way. So he's really just speaking to his own, own party, trying to give them confidence.
Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, Calandra's fired up. Of course he would be. He was elected, remember, federally before this in 2008. Yeah. And literally just months after that election, of course, a similar thing was tried in Ottawa with Stéphane Dion, the leader of the Bloc. And at that point, you'll recall there was a lot of opposition to this. So I think this is something that strikes very close to Paul Calandra's nerves. When Lindsay says, that she doesn't think it will happen, let's remind your listeners, both Del Duca and Horwath were asked about propping up a Ford government if they were elected in a minority situation just 6 weeks ago, and both of them said that they would not.
They said no.
So, Right. So, I mean, to me, that says, well, there has to be an alternative, and the only alternative then is either you go to an election again, or you work together. And I think what's happened federally with this deal is that the Liberals and the NDP have kind of been boxed in. Let's not forget that both the federal Liberals and the NDP made the case this week that the main reason they are doing this is because Canadians want stability. So I don't think there's going to be a situation in a few months, if there is a minority government, that both Andrea Horwath and Stephen Del Duca have separately said they won't prop up, to then send Ontarians back, right back to the polls.
Well, Del Duca says he's open-minded. He's open-minded.
Right. So to the question, is it going to happen? Yes, it's going to happen, if that's the result. But one thing I would point out, and it is an important distinction, because I don't think the parallel exists between what would happen provincially and what has happened federally, is that should such an agreement be formed here after the next provincial election, it would only be between the Liberals and the NDP, and would only happen if neither of them wins the most amount of seats. And I do think that's an important distinction, because it would be done in the context to gain power, not just to maintain it.
All right. I know Lindsay and I have talked about this before, and she doesn't necessarily buy this theory, but I want to get into this again. This was in the Toronto Star this week from Robert Benzie. And it's this idea that this deal that's been struck here in Ottawa between Singh and Trudeau, Ford comes out the big winner. Quote, when Ontario voters elect Liberals federally, they tend to elect Tories provincially. Conversely, when they elect federal Tory governments, the Liberals, and in one instance, the New Democrats, usually win provincially. The phenomena, known as the Underhill balance theory, has held true for about 68 of the past 79 years. It posits that Ontarians prefer their provincial governments to serve as a counterweight to those in Ottawa. Indeed, residents of Etobicoke North gave Ford 52.5% of the vote in the June 28 Ontario election and returned Liberal MP Kirsty Duncan to Ottawa just last September. So the thinking is this coalition that's not a coalition federally is actually going to be good for Doug Ford. What do you think about that, Lindsay? What do you think about that?
Well, I think we only need to look at the last two elections to see why this is, and so through university, I actually have a strong opinion on this, because I have a professor who has written aggressively against this because of when you look at each individual provincial election, right, and what was happening. But I think we actually only need to look at the most recent two. obviously, we can all agree there was no way that the Ontario Liberal government under Kathleen Wynne was going to continue after 2018. That was already written. What was not written was the result of the 2021 election. And there was many a time through that election where clearly the Conservatives were in a very strong position to win.
The O'Toole Conservatives, you mean?
The O'Toole Conservatives, yes. Yeah. So, that when we look at the most recent election, that was one that had already basically been predetermined before people went to the polls, and one where the election and the local ground campaigns make a real difference. So, we could do this through time on each of these campaign nuances of the switches between federal and provincial. Mm-hmm. But I think those two recent examples just sort of show that isn't in the same level of play. The concern that I do have, of course, is the part where Ontario voters are actually very generous, and that we have actually only twice voted out a premier after their first term. And so it is a very rare thing that we don't give people a second chance.
Right.
But that is also to say this is also a very unusual circumstance. Think of this. He is down 19 caucus members from when he was first elected. I believe there's about 6.
Yeah, but up 10 points in the polls. But 10 points in the polls. So it doesn't seem to have mattered. But let me get to Andrew. Let me get to Andrew here because we're a little tight on time. What do you think about this Underhill balance theory? What do you think? Anything to it, Andrew?
I subscribe to it. I appreciate Lindsay's example in saying that O'Toole should have won the last election, rather. But he didn't. So in fact, it does support this thesis, this sort of paradox that I've never really understood. But have sort of come to accept it. And even when you look at the data points that we're talking about, even in those 21 years where there is an exception, many of those have often been years that were just overlap in the tail end of mandates. For example, when the Liberals won in 2015, Trudeau won his election in 2015. You go back and look at the polls, you start to see an almost immediate drop-off for support for Kathleen Wynne provincially. And there were still 3 years of her mandate where her support just, dwindled down until 2018. So I'm not trying to understand the psychology that goes on in voters' heads to reconcile the difference between federal and provincial, but the data supports it as much as Lindsay's talking about. Also elections being about timing, and sometimes them just being cyclical. So I think more often than not, governments are voted out, not in. That's not to say we shouldn't spend 30 minutes a week talking about what happened, but often these things do just come down to timing.
All right. When we come back, are we going to have an early election? What happened to the rumors of an early election? Those are red hot rumors. I need rumors. I need the scoop. I need to know what Andrew and Lindsay are hearing about the possibility of an early election, a late early election. Queen's Park is the place to be these days. That's where the buzz is. And this is Ontario Politics This Week on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Riding requires attention and focus. No distractions, no moment of unawareness, because one brief moment can cost a lifetime of other moments. Everyone deserves to arrive home.
The Maritime provinces are home to some of the oldest settlements in Canadian history. But did you know that one of the first was actually started by black settlers? Take a minute to learn about the rise and untimely fall of Africville. Black people have lived in Nova Scotia since before the founding of Halifax in 1749, but it wasn't until after the American Revolution in the late 1700s and early 1800s that large groups of Black settlers began to arrive in the province, many of whom were former slaves promised freedom and land in Nova Scotia. What they encountered when they arrived, however, was racist treatment by their white neighbors and government officials. This pushed many Black people to build homes on the outskirts of town instead. But despite the area receiving little support from government officials and lacking necessities like functioning sewage systems, access to clean water, and proper garbage disposals, the tight-knit community persevered, and so Africville was born. For more than 150 years, the small community grew, expanding from just a few homes to a population of over 400 people. Everything changed, however, in 1964 when plans for a new bridge and the idea of urban renewal prompted the municipality to set its sights on Africville's land. Instead of investing in the community, officials approved a relocation program that promised free job training and employment assistance to help residents through relocation. But the reality wasn't so kind. Residents had their belongings moved in city dump trucks and homes were demolished immediately after their owners left. Of the 400-plus people living in Africville, only 14 residents held clear legal titles to their land, so the rest were only given $500 with the promise of more social aid in the future. Not much else was actually done to support Africville and its residents until 2001, when a United Nations report called for reparations to be paid to the community. In 2010, Halifax Mayor Peter Kelly apologized for the atrocities against Africville as part of a $4.5 million compensation deal. In 2021, Councillor Lindell Smith put forward a 7-part motion to plan for the future of Africville alongside local organizations and the descendants of former residents. Today, there's a public park and museum where Africville once stood to teach visitors about the history of the land and its community. If you've never heard of Africville, you're not alone. The tragic story of this small Black community in Nova Scotia is not as well known as it should be.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
9:51, Part 2 Ontario Politics this week with Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander. There are rumors there was going to be an early provincial election. That Doug Ford would call the election about 1 month early. What happened to those rumors? I guess motivated by wanting to get ahead of any bad news, like a spike in COVID cases, for example, post-lifting restrictions, or get ahead of any bad economic news because of inflation, record high gas prices, these kinds of things. Andrew, what's the latest rumor? Going to be an early election or what? What do you know? You're tuned in, Andrew. What do you know? Come on.
Very, very kind of you, Rob, not to call me out on being wrong. So I'll say it. I was wrong.
You were wrong. Okay.
I did think that there was a time a few months ago that I thought it would be very advantageous for this government to go a bit early. I guess I'd maintain that. I do think it would have been.
That may not be wrong. That may not be wrong.
And may not be wrong, but I think I think the election will be now pretty decidedly on June 2nd, and I think you don't need to really do much more than look at a calendar to come up with that. I think they've missed the time frame to go early. We're already getting very close to the end of March. The Premier is only now starting to really hit the road with these pre-budget announcements, the electric vehicle announcements, the new hospitals, the new medical schools. The government's starting to roll out these big promises that need to be baked into the budget. And we're almost at the end of March. We don't have a date for the budget yet. There's an Easter break week next month. So, I'd imagine that we're not seeing a budget until the later half of next month, which really means that the government only has a certain amount of time, few days really, before the writ has to be dropped in the first week of May.
Okay. What do you think about Andrew's analysis? I think, and I would never call out Andrew, I think it is very wise Very wise. What happened to the rumors, though? What happened to the rumors? Those were pretty juicy rumors there for a while.
Yeah, I think it highlights the fact that this, business of government continues to get in the way of good plans that the Ford government may have. Yeah. There is a work back that is required for a budget. They realized, 3-4 weeks ago when they introduced legislation to remove the fine for not having a budget by March 31st from themselves. The Premier would have been fined $9,000 for meeting their own deadline of the budget by the end of March. So they knew they were going to meet that deadline. With needing time for printing and saying that there's going to be a budget date, the earliest I think they'd be looking at is the week of the 11th. And then the following week, the week of the 18th, is the constituency week, the week after Easter weekend, that Andrew was mentioning, which actually does squarely place the last week of April as sort of their last opportunity. If you were going to have even pull a week ahead on an election day for a 28-day campaign. So it's just not going to happen.
Not happening. Okay.
Not going to happen. But it would have made sense because when they think about wanting to try to catch, it doesn't matter to voters when it is, but it does matter to political parties who need to organize. But at the same time, it was a helpful rumor because I believe it probably would have made everybody else get ready sooner, knowing that it could be up to a month earlier.
Okay. Let's get to the latest poll. It's an Ipsos poll. Daryl Bricker. It's 38, 28, 24. 38 for the PCs, 28 for the Liberals in second place, 24 for the NDP. But this is what really jumps out at me. Tie, by the way, here in Eastern Ontario, according to this poll, 34-34. PCs and Liberals tied. NDP 10 points, 9 points back. With the ever-important 905 swing region of the GTA, the Progressive Conservatives are at 51% and have a commanding lead over the Liberals at 25, the NDP at 16, the Greens at 6. Quote, a lead of this size in the 905 would assure the Tories' re-election. What do you think of that number, Andrew? I think it could be an early election night, June 2nd. I think I will be going to bed early the night of June 2nd. If they're up by 26 in the 905, it's over. It's over.
Yeah, it's certainly encouraging numbers for the Premier and his team, especially in those essential ridings. You look at the breakdown by the regions, and it really doesn't paint a good picture for the Liberals or the NDP. In addition to that, I would point to the 50% approval rating for the Premier. Those numbers just don't scream change election.
No.
It's just as much, Lindsay will know this, about motivating your own base to come out. And we talked a bit earlier about sort of the trends in, the opposite governments holding power at different levels. Well, I think if you were to look at the other trend, and that's one of polls in the last, 10 elections, the party leading 3 months before an election wins 8 times out of 10. The obvious exception to that would have been in 1990, where, to this day, you still can't find a single person that voted for Bob Rae. So I think all that to say, the Liberals have a bit of a steep hill to climb.
Okay. Lindsay, am I just going to conk out 9 o'clock at night on June 2nd because this thing is over? The Liberals are behind 25 points in the GTA?
No, I don't think so. I think we're going to have an interesting, at a minimum, we're going to have a very interesting campaign. We have a lot of races with independents and new blue candidates in ridings that have totally changed their population, ridings like Cambridge. There's going to be a lot of very interesting races. There's a lot of seats that don't have an incumbent. As I said, more than 19. There is a lot of runway room left. I'm always reminded that a poll is how people felt yesterday. Yes. And there is also, as we just said earlier, there was many moments through the entire federal election just last summer that the numbers would have clearly said that we were going to have a conservative government. So there's a lot of runway room, and the cycle just moves faster than it used to. So we do need to have an election play out. I'm sure the Conservative campaign is very encouraged by those numbers, but they also can breed complacency. So it will make for an interesting race. Okay. It'll be interesting to see how the Conservatives put together a campaign, considering the ease they had last time and the fact that they clearly are not meeting their own deadlines on things to try to pull this ahead earlier.
Thanks for joining us, both of you. Great to hear from you.
Thanks, Rob.
Speak soon. Bye-bye. Andrew Brander is the Vice President at Crestview Strategy, and Lindsay Maskell is a Liberal strategist and a former advisor to Premier McGuinty. That's Ontario politics this week. The Talkback Hour. We're talking carbon tax increase a week from tomorrow. Carbon tax going up on the Rob Snow Show here on City News.
Being a crossing guard works great as part of my schedule as a high school student because I still have time to do my tests and assignments while earning a little bit of cash on the side.
Working as a crossing guard fits into my current lifestyle because it gives me a lot of time during the day to pursue hobbies that I'm very interested in.
A friend of mine introduced me to this job. I didn't know it was actually a paid job.
I always start my day. It's a very little, I guess, few months baby, and she always comes with her dad on a pram, and the smile she has, like, oh my God.
Well, I think the OSC is a very good employer. They show quite clearly that they care about you. They're very polite.
They really make you feel like you're part of a family.
It's fun. I really enjoy it.
Gets us out of the house, too.
Yeah.
Is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News. Now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 24th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 2 degrees. In Smiths Falls, 3. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. It's a major pushback from Ukraine this morning, affecting the supply chain for Russian troops. We get more from City News reporter Irene Precklett.
Ukrainian forces are pushing back today, a major victory. Ukrainian forces saying they destroyed a Russian ship at an occupied port. Verified videos circulating online do show the ship burning. It's believed the ship held supplies for Russian troops, devastating Mariupol. There are about 100,000 civilians there who are still trapped. This woman was able to get out, but says Russian troops fired on her car as she was trying to get her father. She was forced to leave him behind.
I would never, ever wish anybody to feel this. You're leaving and your family is staying.
This as the United Nations now says that more than half of Ukraine's children, half, have been displaced by war. Ukraine's president is pleading for more military help and is also calling on people all over the world to gather in the streets of their cities to show support for peace, freedom, and Ukraine. Irene Precklett, City News.
City News time 10:04. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We still have some rain and drizzle at times, though, and a gusty wind out of the east today. The high 6 degrees. Some areas may get a bit warmer than that. Tonight, cloudy with more light rain, a low 3. For today, the high 6.
And right now, 2 degrees in Ottawa, 3 degrees in Smiths Falls. A 13-year-old girl struck in a hit and run over a month ago on Meadowlands continues her recovery in hospital as police hunt for the driver responsible. Serena Summers has suffered a bit of a setback, though, running a fever last night, keeping her in hospital longer than anticipated. Her mother, Anita Armstrong, was on Kiss FM this morning with Sandra and Chris.
She suffers from neuropathic pain in her right foot, and so it's excruciating pain. She often rates it 9 out of 10, and so she's on some pretty strong medication for it. It's a topical cream called ketamine and something else, so it's very powerful, but that doesn't even help.
Anita says her daughter is so sad she can't even go for walks around the hospital. Police continue the search for the driver of the hit-and-run vehicle. They're following up leads on the newer model, smaller, dark-colored sedan, which may be blue. Ridership levels at OC Transpo are still way down. The chair of the Transit Commission, Allan, Hubley, gave an estimate on the number this morning.
If I gave you a guess, I would say it's probably somewhere between 30 and 50.
Now, the transit budget pegged ridership for 2022 at 82% of the pre-pandemic level. That seems unattainable, but Hubley says it's due to a lack of public servants working in the office and taking transit. He says making changes to the transit plan is on the table, but they want some clarity as the return-to-work plan for the government workers is still being hammered out. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Is the carbon tax a moneymaker for you? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Yeah, we're going to talk about the carbon tax. With your help, I hope. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, 1 week from tomorrow, 1st of April, the carbon tax, the price on pollution, is supposed to go up by 25%, from $40 a ton to $50 a ton. Now, the Trudeau government has always said, look at our rebate program. Okay, the climate action incentive. You get back all the money you paid in carbon tax during the year. And some people, they even come out ahead. They make money from this. Basically, it's a moneymaker at the end of the year. They come out ahead. So, 2 questions for you. The first question, do you believe that? Do you believe that? Do you believe that you get more money back through the carbon tax rebate, the climate action incentive, than you pay in carbon tax throughout the year? What's your feeling there? And what should happen? This is the second question. What should happen with that planned increase of the carbon tax? It's scheduled to take effect next week. What do you say there? Go ahead. It's only money. It's only money, and there's more where that came from. Sure. Gas prices are already at record highs. Let's jack the carbon tax up 25%. Or do you say, hey, come on, give me a break. Hit the pause button. Some conservative leadership candidates are saying, hit the pause button. The carbon tax shouldn't go up a week from tomorrow. And other conservative candidates in the leadership race are saying, why don't we get rid of the carbon tax altogether? So I'd love to hear from you. We have at least 3 lines available there. Do you get all your carbon tax money back when you do the climate action incentive? You pay the carbon tax throughout the year, but the Trudeau government has always said you get all the money back at tax time through the climate action incentive. Do you believe that? And what should happen to this carbon tax hike that is scheduled to take place next week? Yeah, a week from tomorrow. What should the federal government do with that? Just let the carbon tax go up 25% to $50 a ton? Do you keep the tax where it is? Hey, press the pause button on raising the carbon tax right now, given the rising cost of living, or how about scrap it altogether? How's that for an idea? Let's just start right there with those two questions, and we'll see where the conversation goes. 750-1310. Okay, 750-1310. 613-750-1310. The carbon tax. Maybe, gosh, that carbon tax. That may be the most controversial revenue generator for the government since it brought in the GST. I've really been wanting to get into this issue for quite some time with you. Today's as good a day as any, maybe even more so, just given this week's deal between Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Singh, the Liberal NDP supply and confidence agreement. These two parties have big plans for your money. Dental care program that will cost several $billion. National pharmacare program that will cost exponentially more than that. So for the federal government, given this deal that's been orchestrated, it's probably not thinking long and hard about tax breaks or tax holidays or pausing planned tax increases. I would have to think, just because of the price tag of these planned social programs, the government's going to be looking for more money. Okay? The NDP and the Liberals are saying right now one way they plan to get some of that money is to put a special tax on big financial services firms, on the big banks, the big insurance companies, maybe oil companies too. Hey, let's whack them. Let them pay. The government's going to say. Okay? And just ignore the very idea that those companies would ever download those added costs onto the consumer. But look, when this deal was announced earlier this week, we were all listening to it here, right, on the Rob Snow Show. There wasn't much talk from the Prime Minister or the NDP leader about what's going to happen next week with the carbon tax, which, as I said, goes up a week from tomorrow, $50 a ton. So what should the federal government do with that carbon tax? What should the federal government do with that carbon tax? Raise it next week, hit the pause button, scrap it, get rid of it, send it to the dustbin of history. And the government has always said, we have a rebate program. It's not fair to just focus on you paying the carbon tax. You also have to talk about the money you get back through the climate action incentive. Your incentive to fight climate change is the climate action incentive. And we have designed it in such a way that you get all the money back that you pay in carbon tax throughout the year. Some people even get more money back than they paid in carbon tax throughout the year. Do you believe that? So those are kind of the two questions that I want to get into this morning. Here on the Rob Snow Show Talkback Hour, right to the phones. Fonzie in Ottawa, you're up first on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning. So the government has always said through the climate action incentive, you get all the money back that you pay in carbon tax throughout the year. Do you believe that?
Wow.
Do you believe that?
No.
No, why not?
We're not going to get money back.
Why not?
We're not going to get money back. And how is it going to fix the climate change? How does money fix climate change?
Well, first of all, you have the higher fuel prices, which acts as a disincentive, right, for you to use fossil fuels. That's one way it's supposed to work. The money that's collected from the carbon tax, the government keeps some of that money, obviously, and says we invest it into, greener, cleaner technologies in the clean economy. That's what the government says. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what they say. I'm not saying I necessarily believe what they say.
Between me and you.
Yeah. Yeah,
does the tax fix the climate change? No. NATO, they had a meeting in NATO, 3 months ago?
Right.
About fighting the climate.
Okay.
I think what the politicians around the world heard was fight each other, not fight the climate.
Okay.
Because by fighting each other, we're not fixing the climate.
But you're saying, okay.
The thing in Ukraine, the energy that it's going to cost to rebuild that city, that's a lot of harm on the climate.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying.
We see it. And the carbon tax in Canada, I think we're just getting gouged once again.
It's a gouge. Okay.
And the tax is not going to fix the climate. We need some action.
Okay.
Remember the last time we talked about that, educating our new kids. It's not about taxing the people. It's about educating for the future generation about cleaning the climate.
Okay, Fonzie. Yeah, I do remember that conversation. Yes, I do remember it. Now that you mention it, I do. So as far as this, the carbon tax goes up next week, so the price of gas is going to go up a little bit again next week.
Again.
What do you think should happen with that?
Nothing will happen.
No, but what do you think should happen, Fonzie? If you were running the country.
We have our own oil here.
Yeah.
I mean, why are we gouging our own people?
All right.
We've been talking about that for years. And like you were saying, the money that the government's going to get from the carbon tax, yes, a bit will go and fight the climate.
Yeah.
But the rest of it will pay for their errors that they've been doing for the last 6 years.
Gotcha. Okay.
Somebody has to pay for that, and taxes doesn't fix the climate. I'm sorry to say about it.
All right, Fonzie. Don't be sorry, Fonzie. Don't be sorry. Thank you. You've got us off to a great start here. To Dunrobin, Allan. Good morning, Allan. You're on City News.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. Now, the government says, we have this rebate program, climate action incentive. You get all the money back that you pay in carbon tax throughout the year. Do you believe that?
I don't know how it works. Like, are they going to look at everyone and how many vehicles they own to give the carbon tax back?
Okay.
Like, I own a small business. I have 5 vehicles on the road, so I don't know how I would get back what I've spent.
So, in other words, you don't believe that, right? You don't believe that.
Unless they're taking an account to every vehicle I own, like I have 5 trucks on the road. I have a tractor at home. Like, I don't know how they're going to possibly incentivize the small businesses with multiple vehicles.
Right.
No, I don't believe they're gonna pay me back what I've spent.
Okay. They say they have been. I mean, this has been a policy now. This climate action incentive that you get when you do your taxes has been in effect for quite some time now. So
no, I definitely didn't get back what I spent.
You don't think so? Okay. What do you think should happen with the planned increase to the carbon tax? It's going up 1 week from tomorrow.
I think it should be scrapped altogether.
Scrap it altogether, yeah, okay.
I don't think it's helping anything, but I also don't think he will. I think he's too stubborn to scrap it or to even lay it off for a little while till gas goes down.
Okay. Thank you, Allan. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take one more before we stop here. We'll take this call. It's in Chelsea. Craig, good morning. You're on City News.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Craig. So do you think that you get back as much money through the climate action incentive as you paid in carbon tax throughout the year?
Well, no, I don't get any of it because I'm in Quebec.
Well, you're in Quebec. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. You don't have because it is the backstop, right? Yeah. So right. Quebec has its own plan. But right. What do you think? Well, generally speaking, what do you think of the government's claim on the carbon tax then?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure for Ontario folks, but I know, like, as a National Capital Region resident, I do a lot of my life is on the Ontario
on the Ontario side. Okay, yeah.
Will affect my prices. I usually buy gas when I'm in Ottawa.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so I know for me, I'm not getting any of it back, and I'm sure that affects a lot of people in the National Capital Region who live in Quebec, because all of our prices will go up. But we're not getting any. We're not getting a cent back for it. So,
what do you think should happen with the carbon tax increase? Even though you may not be paying this particular carbon tax, nevertheless, you do. A lot of your life it revolves around the Ottawa area, so you're going to get hit by it. What do you think should happen? Maybe pause it, scrap it.
Well, at least pause it during the
okay.
inflation rates for sure.
Yeah. What do you have to worry about? You're going to get $500, Craig. You're going to get the Lego buck. You're going to get the Lego bucks, Craig.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what I'll do with all that money.
$500. That's also a tax thing too. I think that works through the Quebec income tax. I think is how they're going to do that. So, all right, Craig. Thank you for your call. 750-1310. 750-1310. We're talking carbon tax increases, carbon tax claims on the Rob Snow Show Talkback Hour. Have a phone line for you. This is City News.
Whispers in the wind, slowly blowing by. Stories being told without even knowing mine. Picture all of it going through my mind. People being bold and they stepping out of line. Now think about the lives, think about the kind of people People who deny, then try to undermine. Gossip when they can, try to damage lives. Problems where I stand, but I'm never gonna hide. No, they ain't never been through all of this. Seeing you succeed, but try to ruin your biz. Try to bruise all of it, so you lose all of it. Deception and destruction to confuse all of it. Chitter chat, hear the chitter chat. Haters ain't about it, and they only chitter chat. Chitter chat, chitter chat. Hear the chitter chat. Cowards talk the loudest, and they only chitter chat. Chitter chat, chitter chat. Hear the chitter chat. Haters ain't about it, and they only chitter chat. Chitter chat, chitter chat. Hear the chitter chat. Cowards talk the loudest, and they only chitter chat. First they talking quiet, now they talking loud. Before they gave me dabs, now they never come around. Still they walking silent, hiding with the crowd. See the hater chat, yet they never hold it down. Slandering my name, trying to bring a shame. The truth will set you free, so forget about the games. Time to get it out the way, save my energy today. Brush that dirt up off the shoulder, walk away from the hate. Nah, no, they ain't never been through all of this. Seeing you succeed, but try to ruin your biz. Try to bruise all of it, so you lose all of it. Deception and destruction to confuse all of it. Chitter chat, hear the chitter chat. Haters ain't about it, and they only chitter chat. Chitter chat, chitter chat. Hear the chitter chat. Cowards talk the loudest, and they only chitter chat. Chitter chat, chitter chat. Hear the chitter chat. Haters ain't about it, and they only chitter chat. Chitter chat, chitter chat. Hear the chitter chat. Cowards talk the loudest, and they only chitter chat. Chitter chat, chitter chat. Hear the 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 chitter chat.
Your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Yeah, so it's almost that time of year again. Time for the carbon tax to go up. Great timing, Mr. Trudeau. $40 to $50 a ton. Now, the Trudeau government has always said, we have a rebate program, Rob Snow. It's called the Climate Action Incentive, and it works so well, you might actually make money off of the carbon tax. The claim is you get back all the money you pay in carbon tax. Okay, throughout the year. Whatever you pay in carbon tax, you're getting that money back through our Climate Action Incentive, and some people will come out ahead at the end of the year. I want to know, first of all, do you believe that, and what do you think should happen with that planned increase of the carbon tax scheduled to take effect Friday of next week? 750-1310. Ed in Ottawa. Good morning, Ed.
Yes, good morning.
Hi, Ed.
I'm just calling in case people don't realize that the carbon tax actually used to be paid when you filed your income tax all in one large sum.
Yes.
And they've changed it now to quarterly. So
they're going quarterly, yes. Yeah.
So you don't get it until July. So I just think they did that so they could hang on to your money longer. And I was disappointed because there's probably a lot of seniors out there on fixed incomes that were kind of like hoping to get that now.
Oh, I see.
Having to wait for it.
Well, okay.
Yeah. Now, the other issue that...
But what about the claimed, Ed, that you're going to actually, if you don't make all your money back that you pay in carbon tax, you might even come out ahead, Ed. Do you believe that?
Maybe it's for some, but I think once it goes up to $170 a ton, we'll all be paying more.
Okay.
Because my natural gas bill, the carbon tax on it was $50 just for 1 month.
Wow. Okay.
And that's at $40. Everyone should look at their Enbridge bill. That's at $40 a ton. So imagine when it's $170. How much is the carbon tax going to be then?
Yeah. Good point, Ed. Good point. So what do you think should happen next week with this increase? I mean, it's going up 25% from $40 to $50, right? So
they should put it on hold.
Put it on hold. Okay. Hit the pause
Anyways,
button.
just not to sound too cynical, but somebody told me that the reason why they postponed it and put it in quarterly payments is that there's a lot of seniors out there that are waiting for that. and they're hoping maybe that some of them die. So once you're dead, you don't get the carbon tax.
That is pretty cynical, Ed.
Yes.
I wouldn't assign those motives, but maybe some people would. 750-1310, 750-1310. Yeah, the Trudeau government has always said, hey, climate, they don't even call it a carbon tax, first of all. They call it the price on pollution. I mean, how could anybody be opposed to putting a price on pollution? I mean, if you're opposed to a price on pollution, just what kind of scoundrel are you? I mean, the price on pollution. That's what they call the carbon tax. The Parliamentary Budget Officer is going to join us on the show. He has a new report out today on the carbon tax. His office doesn't call it a carbon tax, calls it a fuel surcharge. Now, how popular would it be if the politicians call it a fuel surcharge? Right? And we're going to hike the fuel surcharge next week by 25%. But anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked. Government has always said, don't worry, okay? We are going to make you whole at tax time. And whatever you pay in carbon tax throughout the year, you'll get it back. And some of you will get it even more than you paid in carbon tax throughout the year. Do you buy that? And what should happen next week with this hike in the carbon tax? Is it Yves? Yes, sir. I'm good. You're calling from Hodsback. So do you think, when you think about all the carbon tax that you pay throughout the course of the year, do you think you get all of this back at tax time?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. So why do you say that?
I do 1,000 kilometers a week.
Wow. That's a lot.
And I don't even leave town. I deliver newspaper. I'm a distribution manager for the Southeast End.
Okay.
And there's no way I get my money back.
No way. Gosh, these gas prices must be a killer for you if you're driving 1,000 kilometers a week. My God.
My expenses went up 50% in the last year.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Goodness gracious.
And my salary didn't go up 50%. That's for sure. And neither did my carbon tax rebate.
No. So, obviously, you're not a big fan of the carbon tax going up next week, I suspect.
No, definitely not. They've already made up the carbon tax. The money from carbon tax that they would have made up for the increase is already made up in the HST since the price of gas went up.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. He says no way. There's no way he's getting all his money back. 1,000 kilometers of driving. Holy smokes. A week, 50,000 kilometers a year. Holy cow. Mark in Ottawa. Mark, you're on City News.
Yes, Rob. First-time caller.
Well, I appreciate it.
All the time.
I appreciate you calling today. So the government says, Mark, don't worry about the carbon tax. You get it all back at tax time. You might even come out ahead at the end of the day, Mark. What do you think about that claim?
It's an absolute lie. It's another scam by them.
Okay.
To try to grab more tax money from us. What are we really getting in return? Like their fella called before. How is taxes or money going to fix the environment?
Well,
I live in Sarsfield, Ottawa.
Okay.
All the way out on the border. I got to drive to Orleans 4 times a day. I bought a new car. I've had it for 6 months. I have 36,000 kilometers on it. So do the math.
Holy cow.
How am I supposed to drive less, incentivized by paying more at the pump? It's crazy. It's a tax on the middle class again. They're taken from those who have to drive, and I did my young daughter's taxes last night. She's getting carbon. She's getting a carbon.
Carbon rebate. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And she doesn't drive.
And she doesn't
leave the house.
Okay. Well, she's coming out ahead. She's your carbon offset. There you go, Mark.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that not a redistribution of money?
I guess so. Yeah. Well, you know what Stephen Harper called the carbon tax, right? What did he call the carbon tax? Do you know what he called it? Do you remember? He called it a money-sucking socialist scheme, is what he called it.
Oh, I completely agree. We're being lied to. We're being lied to again.
Being lied to. Okay.
Just like this previous days of them signing their pact between two parties. Is that not an insult to us?
They say, and look, I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here. It provides stability, Mark. You know, everybody was crying about an unnecessary election, and now you don't have to worry about any kind of election for the next 3 years.
That kills me because that's negating everybody who's voted, right? Because he's got a minority government. It's suddenly now he's a majority.
Yeah.
What about everybody who voted? It's like we don't matter. That should be changed.
Okay.
I mean, two parties should not be allowed to sign agreements like that. You can make a pact on each individual bill, but anyway, that's a whole other.
We can talk about that. Tomorrow's a Friday free for all, so we can go all over the place. And you can call me back, Mark. Thank you. The news is coming up. We're talking carbon tax today. Yes, we are going up 1 week from tomorrow by 25%. My goodness, what are you thinking? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Calgary Stampede is a world-renowned festival celebrating wrangling, bull riding, and everything cowboy. But did you know that many people credit its origins to a Black Canadian? Take a minute to meet John Ware. The word cowboy has racist roots. Before the American Civil War, white ranchers were called cowhands, but the enslaved black men and women working alongside them were actually referred to as cowboys to infantilize and disrespect black ranchers. The legend of cowboy John Ware is full of impressive feats and awe-inspiring skill, including the ability to train even the wildest broncos and easily hold a horse on its back. But the real story of John Ware is one that starts from more humble beginnings. Ware was born into slavery in the United States, gaining his freedom towards the end of the American Civil War in 1865. Ware's skills with cattle ranching developed as he traveled throughout the United States, eventually settling in a town southwest of present-day Calgary, Alberta, which made him one of the first black pioneers in the prairies. Over time, news of Ware and his amazing cowboy skills began to spread, and people came from across North America to witness his horsemanship and skills as a rancher. Eventually, Ware went on to own many of his own ranches. In 1892, he became the first man in Western Canada to earn the title of steer wrestler, and Ware's feats in local contests set the stage for the Calgary Stampede Rodeo we know today. In September of 1905, Ware was killed in a freak accident with his horse, and more than 10,000 mourners from across the region attended his funeral, making it one of the largest in Alberta history. Though his true story is difficult to separate from the legends around him, Ware's status as a respected forefather of cowboy skill continues to be celebrated today. Ware has dedicated monuments across Alberta, including several sites near his first ranch, a Calgary school in his namesake, and a building at the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 24th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 3 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 4. Here's what's making news this hour. A major supply link for Russia in its war against Ukraine has been struck. Video footage showing a supply ship on fire after a Ukrainian attack on an occupied port. It comes as NATO promised to send more equipment that will protect against things like biological, chemical, and nuclear threats. Ukraine's president is still asking for equipment like tanks to be sent by NATO. Now, NATO leaders are extending the mandate of the Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg to an extra year. That will help steer the 30-nation military organization through this security crisis sparked by Russia's war. Stoltenberg tweeted today that he is honored by that decision. Ottawa Transit Commission will meet next week. The budget for that department was based on ridership getting to 82% of pre-pandemic levels this year. Chair Allan Hubley tells the Rob Snow Show this morning, right now that increases or that ridership is likely 30 to 50%. He said transit does hinge on federal government's decision on whether civil servants are told to go back to the office or continue working from home. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Is the carbon tax a money maker for you? Do you make money from the carbon tax? And we're talking about the carbon tax because it's going up next week from $40 a ton to $50 a ton. That's a 25% increase. The Trudeau government has always claimed you can't just look at the carbon tax. You also have to look at our climate action incentive program And through that program, you get all the money back that you pay in carbon tax during the year, which has always made me wonder why you take it in the first place. But nevertheless, that's their claim. And for some people, they'll even make more money than they've paid in carbon tax throughout the year. So I want to know if you believe that. Mr. Guilbeault, the climate change minister, the environment and climate change minister, Steve Guilbeault, was on his Twitter last night. I missed this. David just pointed this out to me during the news break. And he says 8 out of 10 households get all their money back in carbon tax. Okay, play it. I haven't heard this yet. Let's play this from the environment minister.
I'd like to tell you only half the story. The reality is that the gas price increase that we're seeing has nothing to do with carbon pricing and everything to do with the war in Ukraine and provincial taxes. They don't tell you that 8 out of 10 households in Canada are better off with the application of carbon pricing than without.
Better off. 8 out of 10 households. 8 out of 10 households are better off. Now, I mentioned Mr. Giroux. Yves Giroux is the Parliamentary Budget Officer. And he's going to join me. What time is he coming on, David? 11:15? Yeah, he's so super smart. He has a new report on the carbon tax this morning, which is, he calls it, this is how it's described, a distributional analysis of federal carbon pricing under the government's A Healthy Environment, A Healthy Economy plan. Healthy environment, healthy economy. And apparently, in government circles, this is called the HE plan. Healthy environment, HE. Healthy economy, HE. He. It's the he plan. And he says, quote, most households in provinces under the backstop, like Ontario, will see a net loss resulting from federal carbon pricing under the he plan. That is, household carbon costs will exceed the climate action incentive payments households receive. So you have the environment minister last night on his Twitter saying 8 out of 10 households come out ahead. They're making money off the carbon tax. And the parliamentary budget officer, 12 hours later, new report saying that's not true. This is a money loser for most Canadian households. And you know what it actually does? Because it's a tax, right? It's a tax. It actually increases the deficit, according to the latest Parliamentary Budget Office report. The carbon tax is a tax. They take the money from us, and yet the budget deficit goes up, not down, which is a really, really remarkable achievement. That is an incredible achievement. That is seriously counterintuitive. Roger in Ottawa South. Roger or Robert? Sorry, Robert in Ottawa South. Robert? Ottawa South? Robert? Roger? No? Gonzo. Okay, 750-1310, 750-1310. It is the second half of the Talkback Hour. Robert in North Gore. Let's try this one. Robert, North Gore.
Hello.
Hi, Robert.
Hi there. You just described to me another government program that's counterintuitive that, in essence, doesn't even do anything for the carbon that's going in the air.
Okay, but what I want to get at is they have these rebates, right? Used to be once a year. They're going to do it 4 times a year, kind of like the GST checks, if you used to get GST checks, called the Climate Action Incentive. The government's claim is you get all your money back at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. Or even more money than you pay in carbon tax throughout the year. Do you buy that, Robert? Do you believe that, first of all?
No, because it's another one of the many programs where you're left trying to find the yellow ball under the 3 coconuts.
Okay, I gotcha.
The incentives that they're putting out there, first of all, you have to jump through hoops to figure them out.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Greener Homes program.
Oh, that's a fiasco.
The Greener Homes program allows for people to upgrade their home, put new doors, windows in their home, spend $40,000 and get about $2,000 back, or upgrade your furnace Like, for instance, my furnace, I burn oil and wood because I don't have natural gas out in North Gore.
Right.
So I burn about 10 cords of wood a year. I'm putting all that carbon in the air, and about $1,000 to fill my oil tank now, which used to cost about $500, is also being burnt. And I'm upgrading that furnace now. I'm just on the verge of doing that, which is going to cost me $20,000 to become carbon neutral.
Switching it over to what fuel?
With a heat pump.
A heat pump,
air source heat pump, which is what everybody's recommending, which will cost me to $20,000, and I'll get about $1,500 back from the government to do that. So I just described to you $60,000 upgrade to my home, in which I'll probably get maybe between $4,000 and $5,000 back to become carbon neutral,
right,
and improve the efficiency of my home.
Yes.
I don't see everybody having that kind of money to upgrade their home, and that virtually is everybody's personal way of saying, I'm now reducing the amount of carbon that
I'm doing my part. I'm doing my part, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So short of going and getting an all-electric vehicle, which is going to cost me another $15,000, I'm looking, just in my personal use of carbon, I'm looking at $110,000 to do my part.
Wow.
That's a lot of money.
Sure is. So whatever you would get back, even if it's a few $100s every couple of months.
If you go and get a Tesla, I don't think you're going to get any money back.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Robert. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's not cheap to go green. Up next, 750-1310, second half of the Talkback Hour, talking carbon taxes. Kevin in Kanata. Kevin, thank you for calling,
how
Kevin.
you doing there?
I'm good, Kevin. So the government says whatever you pay in carbon tax throughout the year, you'll get it back. Maybe even more money back. Do you buy that?
Well, anyone who does is a really good comedian. They should take up stand-up comedy. I'm just looking at my taxes right now. I got my assessment back the other day. I filed early because, whatever. I'd like to get these things over with.
Sure. Yep.
Here's my climate action incentive quarterly amount.
Yes.
No, sorry. So it's $75.
$75.
Yeah.
For the quarter, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, that is for the quarter, but
right. So you'd get $300.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm going to get $300.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the percentage is now. Maybe you're better tuned in on it. But what the percentage that they're what percent has a liter of gas gone up since all this carbon nonsense went through?
Yeah, I wish I had that exact figure. I was looking for that number this morning, and I thought I had it somewhere in my archives, but I couldn't find it, Kevin.
I can tell you one thing: $300. I mean, even if they put 2 or 3% on,
right,
it would barely cover that for the amount I'm driving. And why not? I mean, why not have people collect their receipts, and everybody would get the amount? You can put a number down. So if you do this in sales and things like that, if somebody spends $1,200 or $1,200 a month on gas, you keep a log of this, and you'll get it back from your company. But that type of program, I mean, there's tens of thousands of people in Ontario that use that system. And if they call you on it, if the government calls you on it, or your company, they call you on it, you better have the receipts to see. That would make it intelligent, and that's something that this little dictator doesn't know anything about.
All right, Kevin.
You don't learn that type of stuff when you're swinging nothing against teachers, but when you're a substitute drama teacher, I don't think they figure that in.
All right, Kevin. Kevin, gonna jump there. He, $75 every 3 months. He says no. It's not covering what I pay in carbon tax. Okay, and again, it's kind of a two-parter. Carbon tax goes up in a week from tomorrow, April 1st, by 25% to 40, from 40 to 50. The government maintains, whether you're getting back all of it back in one shot or whether you're getting 4 payments a year, you're getting it back. And some of you are going to get more money back than you paid in carbon tax throughout the year. Do you buy that? And the carbon tax is going up by 25%. What should happen? We have some, Polyev says scrap the carbon tax. Brown says hit the pause button on the increase, and so does Giroux. Says don't increase the carbon tax. Al in Metcalfe. Al, good morning. You're on City News.
Yes, hi, Rob.
Hi, Al.
Rob, the point I wanted to make is, does any of us really know if we're getting back everything we pay? I suppose if someone sat down and calculated the number of liters of propane or natural gas or gasoline for their cars, how much they paid out in carbon tax per liter.
Yes.
Okay, fine, and compare that to your climate action incentive rebate. But I think in the discussion, people are forgetting about carbon tax is built into everything, into our overall cost of living in everything we buy. So I always thought from the onset, this climate action incentive coming out with the narrative that we're going to get back what we pay in, quote, what we pay in, it's just a Trojan horse. We have no idea how much of a burden this is on the overall economy.
There's no clarity to it.
There's no clarity,
right,
and that's the beauty of it as far as the Liberal government is concerned. There's no clarity. We have no idea. And for sure, we might come close if we look at our heating cost and gasoline costs. Maybe we come close, and maybe someone would say, well, we get most of it, or we get less or more. That's Stephen Guilbeault's line. But this is just a scam. It's just to pay for the socialist programs and the social programs that the Liberals have been touting. So there you go.
Okay, thank you. You don't buy it for a minute. He doesn't buy it for a minute. Okay, and it's going up again next week. Okay, Robert in Ottawa South, I'll get to your call next. And a couple of lines there. And one of them's for you. 750-1310 in the home stretch of the Talkback Hour. Talking carbon taxes on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Welcome to the Ottawa Civic Centre as we get set for what could be an historical moment in 67's history. Musselman gets hammered by Bickle. Wrist shot deflected, scores! Brian Bickle makes it 1-0 Ottawa.
Brian Bickle, a future premier power forward in the league. The rookie, watch what he does. Big hit, then goes to the net and tips this one home off the stick. Whitmarsh with no chance on the deflection.
Up through center, Shepard with Foy racing for the front. Nice move by Foy. Beautiful. Scores! Second effort, Matt Foy, 2-0 Ottawa.
It's the second effort for Matt Foy that gets his 60th goal, milestone goal of the year. He and Corey Locke now both in 60, the first two players of the season in the OHL to do it, and it's textbook Foy going to the net, and look at the second effort, a goal scorer's goal with his own rebound, and Ottawa takes a 2-0 lead.
Bickle in on Poulin, and he runs into Poulin, runs him right over center, and Brunson McAllis couldn't find the handle. Loose puck, another save, and finally whistled down.
There's a penalty shot. There's a penalty shot for the 67s. Watch what happens here. Big hit. Look at Bickle.
That's what's
wow,
there
he's having a great game, I tell you. Comes out in front, then there's the puck. All of a sudden loose. It hits a skate. And right there on the top, the player kneeling over. We can't get that number. He's standing up right now. It's Chaumont. It's Chaumont. He's got the puck in his right hand, number 22.
And here we go, Albiani. Scores! 3-1 Ottawa. Long pass up to Rodney Ballman. He's got Dickinson. Here's Dickinson. Break, scores! Lou Dickinson restores the 2-goal lead.
How fitting could it be that the Ottawa native, Lou Dickinson, could very well seal the victory for Brian Kilrea's 1,009th pass from Rodney Bauman, and the overage Dickinson makes no mistake, going underneath the blocker above the goal pad.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed history. Brian Kilrea wins 1,000.
The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Carbon tax goes up next week. The price on pollution goes up next week 25% to $50 a ton on its march toward $170 a ton by the year 2030. Now, the government has always said, hey, look, it's a two-step process here. Yeah, you pay the carbon tax, but whatever you pay, you're going to get it back through these quarterly payments, and we will make you whole. And some of you will come out ahead by the end of the year. Do you believe that? And what should happen next week with the carbon tax? Taz in Ottawa. Taz, good morning. Taz?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say, how do you figure that with everything going up in percentage-wise, a tax on top of another tax? I think that we're being gouged, and I'm putting it mildly. I really do. I'm on a low income. I work when I can, and I just seen things go up literally percentage-wise. I don't think I'm getting back much more in those taxes, especially those eco taxes on top of, and those also I believe are going up as well. But the cost of living has gone up quite a bit. If I go out, that also goes out. So I really don't think in my head I'm actually going backwards, and I'm actually in low income. There's a lot of people on fixed incomes that also feel that they're actually going backwards. They're going out less. So I think the economy is stagnating. And I really, I think that the budget officer is onto something, because I think we're all going backwards to some extent or not. We're having less disposable income, especially when you include all the taxes accumulated that also are going up, especially with inflation. That's extremely sensitive, and I think it's really bad in that sense.
Okay, thank you, Taz. Appreciate your points, sir. Thank you for calling. Robert in Ottawa South. Robert, you're on City News. Robert.
I think this is the greatest tax scam ever.
Oh, not the greatest tax ever? It's a moneymaker, according to the Environment Minister, for 8 out of 10 households.
Not according to my pocketbook.
Okay,
and look, the way I'm dealing with it is as follows.
Okay.
I drive less, a lot less.
Okay.
I go out to restaurants less. I think the best thing to do, you don't like this tax, is just find ways to, just not buy gas and not go out. The economy is going to take a hit. The government will have to possibly reevaluate things.
Okay. All right, Robert. Thank you. Worst tax ever. This one, 750-1310, Blackburn Hamlet. Brendan. Good morning, Brendan.
Yes, good morning.
Yeah, hi, Brendan.
I agree with everyone in terms of pocket money or lack of it. I simply want to say that with the tax available, credits available,
yes,
we don't stand a chance. My carbon tax relief is about $30 for the year on a salary of 50 or 60 grand. So, give me a break. It is a useless tax that no one would recover from.
Okay. Thank you, Brendan, for your call. 750-1310. Carol Ann, Renfrew. Morning, Carol Ann.
Hey, good morning.
Hi, Carol Ann.
The only thing, my biggest suggestion for this whole carbon tax thing is the fact that the only ones that are getting benefits from it is the people with kids, because they're getting credits for these children that don't even drive or anything else.
Right.
So the carbon tax needs to go. Like, come on. It's like $300. I spend $190 a week driving to Ottawa, and you're telling me that my carbon tax at $300 is going to be enough?
So this idea that you're being made whole through the tax system with the rebates, the climate action incentive, you don't think you're getting back what you're paying in carbon tax, Caroline?
Highly doubt it.
Highly doubt it. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Okay.
I keep a log, and I'm spending about almost $1,000 a year driving back and forth in carbon tax, and I get $300. How does it compensate?
And that's just driving. Does include everything
that's
else.
just driving,
Yeah.
and that's driving to work. Not pleasure driving, nothing else.
Right. Okay.
So
Okay. All right,
it
Caroline.
needs to go.
Needs to go. Okay. It's not going anywhere. It's only going one direction, and that's up 25% next week. Roy in Ottawa, you're on City News. Roy.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, Roy. Do you get all the money back that you pay in carbon tax throughout the year from the government?
Oh, no.
No. Okay.
And the worst thing that people don't understand is, like, I mean, how do things get delivered produce wise, right?
Sure.
All these, yeah, because, like, I mean, someone's going to have to incur the cost if they're paying more to get your produce to you. Who's ultimately going to be on the hook for that, right?
Yeah.
And then the governments don't have no backbone, right? In terms of, like, okay, so right now, like, in terms of, the whole concept of going green, yeah, it's a great idea, right? But right now, how many people have electric cars? Not that many, right? So if everyone,
not that many. Not right now. Not yet. No.
Correct.
No. Yeah.
So first off, I mean, if everyone starts getting an electric car, what's going to happen to the price of hydro, right? It's supply and demand. So you're going to, sure, they're laughing right now, the people that have these electric cars, because of they're not paying much. But now, if you have an influx of green vehicles on the grid, sure, it's going to bring up the price of hydro, right? And so that's not going to be affordable. What the government needs to do is step in and dictate, put a cap on either hydro or and against the oil companies too, right? It's just, I don't know. It looks like they just keep screwing the taxpayers.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I think that'll be it for calls. Did anybody say yes? Oh, yeah. I'm totally making money from this carbon tax. No, not popular. Look, some politicians, they're politicians. There are political motives at play, obviously. Some politicians are talking about relief from these punishingly high prices. You have out in Alberta, you have Jason Kenney. I mean, he's in a daily battle for his own political survival, Jason Kenney. But he announced a suspension on provincial taxes on gasoline. That's supposed to save drivers in Alberta 13 cents a liter. Quebec, just a couple of days ago, budget week, goes up for election later this year. What did he announce? Every Quebec taxpayer making $100,000 a year and less, one-time interest inflation relief payment, $500. $500. Now, is it politicking from politicians? Sure it is. But would you turn down $500 from the government? It was your money to start with. And watch it. The carbon tax is going to be a big issue in the Conservative Party leadership. Poilievre's long opposed to the carbon tax, promised to get rid of it, was forced to endure O'Toole's embrace of it. And both Patrick Brown and Jean Charest have said they are against the planned increase to the carbon tax for next week. But remember, they both have a history of wanting carbon taxes, both of them. And in California, which has the highest gas prices in the United States, the Los Angeles Times reported yesterday that the governor of California, a Democrat, Gavin Newsom, is planning a $400 tax refund for the owner of each registered vehicle. He's up for re-election as well, capping payments $800 for any person with more than one vehicle registered under the person's name. But households with multiple vehicles registered to different family members could receive far more than that amount, according to the Los Angeles Times. That is happening in one of the most liberal states in the American Republic. No such plan here. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 24th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 3 degrees. It's 4 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. The Prime Minister and other NATO leaders have agreed to step up response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Leaders of the military alliance held an emergency summit earlier today in Brussels. With the details, here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
NATO leaders have now approved the creation of 4 new battle groups in Europe to be stationed in Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. That doubles the international forces taking part in the deterrence missions to prevent Russian aggressions from spreading. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg adds allies will also continue military support for Ukraine and will be providing new equipment to help protect Ukrainians from chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. Stoltenberg says there is serious concern that Russia may use chemical weapons, but stop just short of calling it a red line for NATO.
Any use of chemical weapons will totally change the nature of the conflict. It will be a blatant violation of international law.
Allies also warning China not to get involved after Russia requested military and financial assistance. Ahead of the NATO meeting, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said allies are committed to stopping this unacceptable invasion.
Partners around the world are united in condemning and standing up to Russia.
Trudeau is now taking part in a G7 meeting. He's expected to address the media later. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time 11:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We still have some rain and drizzle at times, though, and a gusty wind out of the east today. The high 6 degrees. Some areas may get a bit warmer than that. Tonight, cloudy with more light rain, a low 3. For today, the high 6.
And right now, 3 degrees in Ottawa. It's 4 degrees in Smiths Falls. Councillors want the federal government to cover any OC Transpo budget shortfalls due to public servants who are working from home. But is that in the best interest of residents? We get the details with City News reporter Chris Curries.
A motion on next week's Transit Commission agenda says OC Transpo has been disproportionately affected by the pandemic and government employees working from home.
The question I'm going to have about the motion at the Commission is going to be, how does this impact what currently is in place?
Chair Allan Hubley says the feds are already covering pandemic-related losses, so he questions if municipal taxpayers would be stuck footing the bill for lost revenue from the non-public servant sector, like students working from home. As for the budget funding formula presumed at 82% pre-pandemic ridership, Hubley says 3 months into the year, and it's at maybe 30 to 50%. Chris Curries, City News.
City News Time 11:03. Police continue searching for a hit-and-run vehicle which left a 13-year-old girl with traumatic injuries in hospital. Serena Summers was scheduled to be released from CHEO, but excruciating pain in a foot and an overnight fever, keeping her in hospital for now. Her mother, Anita Armstrong, tells Sandra and Chris on the Kiss Morning Show today that this is a very emotional time.
She's so sad that she can't walk because we usually take walks around the hospital, and so it's just a really bad time. It's just like, oh my gosh, we were so excited to get ready to go, and now there's a setback, and it's just like, oh my goodness, like I wish we could just catch a break.
The lead investigator in the case is doing a fantastic job following up leads, according to Anita, but no arrests have been made in the February 13th hit and run on Meadowlands. Police are looking for a newer model, possibly dark blue, smaller sedan. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Just a few days ago, two people from the C.D. Howe Institute had an op-ed in the Globe and Mail wondering if the government's next budget would show if it was serious about getting Canada's finances on a more sustainable track. That was before the confidence and supply agreement was announced between the Liberals and the New Democrats. And now new promises are being made about social program expansion, things like dental care, pharmacare. So I encourage you to read that. It was co-authored by Don Drummond, Stauffer Dunning Fellow, Adjunct Professor at the School of Policy Studies at Queen's University, Fellow in Residence at the C.D. Howe Institute, and Bill Robson, CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute. And Bill Robson joins me again this morning here on City News. Good morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, really nice to hear from you. Let's start with the newest news because I do want to get into the nitty-gritty of your op-ed, but as the CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute, I would like your reaction to the announcement Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Singh made earlier this week about the supply and confidence agreement. No election for 3 years, but it could mean potentially more than $20 billion in new spending commitments. What's your reaction to that, Mr. Robson?
Well, it does feel a bit like another log on a fire that was already burning pretty brightly. We've got, in addition to what the fall update from the government late last year prefigured, we've got other commitments. The Parliamentary Budget Officer warned recently that there are many things that the government has said it would do that have big price tags that aren't yet in the fiscal projections. In addition to a sort of baseline track for the federal budget that leaves no room for things to go wrong, we've got those commitments, and now we've got this additional. It's tough to define it, but as I say, it's not as though there wasn't a problem already. So if this does prefigure a lot more tens of billions, then we are looking at higher interest payments and higher taxes.
Okay. What was the problem already?
Well, the problem already was that the pandemic response, I'm not critical of that. Don's not critical of that. Given the speed with which things had to be rolled out, it's excusable that there were a bit more money went out than really needed to. The difficulty is that while that was going on, we had a number of other commitments made, some of which are now in the fiscal forecast and some of which aren't. And then the pandemic spending, though winding down, hasn't wound down as quickly as people thought. So what the government is doing in its fiscal projections is it's showing that the ratio of federal debt to GDP is going to come down, but it's going to come down at a fairly low rate. And there are two concerns that Don and I have about that. One of them is the fairness of it. We would prefer to see some of these debts paid down, the burden of the debt reduced more quickly, because that's fairer. The people who benefited from the spending are the ones who then sort of pay it back rather than just pushing the bill off into the future. The other one is that problems happen from time to time, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine is reminding us of that. So there's going to be a lot of spending pressure from that, which isn't yet in the budget either.
Yeah, national defense budget could be poised for dramatic increase. To meet the NATO commitment would require a 70% increase in the D&D budget. So add that to the mix, right?
Yeah, the amount of money. The amount of money is quite considerable. Now, Canada's very bad at actually spending on defence, so it would get rolled out quite slowly. But we've just been reminded how much more dangerous the world is than we might have liked to think before. So there are already commitments. I'll just mention one other thing. I mean, the government talks a lot about global warming, climate change, and mitigating it. But if we actually think that the scenarios that are often described, the more disastrous ones, are going to play out, then there's very significant money required for adaptation to it as well. And that's not in the budget. So every generation, every few years, we face these new challenges, and that's why it's disturbing to see fiscal policy that is continuing just on this trend, as though every problem that happened in the past is kind of a one-off and the future is all going to be rosy.
Okay. I've heard you speak about the desire for the government to have these so-called fiscal guardrails. I've heard Don talk about them, Don Drummond. I've had John Manley on the program, a former finance minister, talk about the need for fiscal guardrails. Can you explain for the listeners what those guardrails are and why you think they're important, please?
Well, the fiscal guardrails notion is one that the government itself invented. It's not a term I would have chosen. I like the idea of a fiscal anchor. It's got a somewhat more fixed, permanent sound to it. And if your fiscal anchor is actually balancing the budget, getting rid of deficits, then it's got a very definite meaning. And it's something that you can use around the cabinet table or in public discussions to make the key point that every dollar that you spend on something means a dollar that you don't spend on something else, or a dollar that you raise in revenue. And that's what I really like about zero on the bottom line. The guardrails were more the state of the economy, and what they focused on particularly was the labor market at various signs of slack, which at the time they first introduced the concept back in late 2020, we had all sorts of COVID-related problems. What's happened since, though, is that we've had very strong stimulus spending. We've had very easy monetary policy. The labor market, as of the latest release, is just showing all kinds of strength. We've got labor shortages all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so if the government were serious about the guardrails concept related to the state of the labor market, they would have started to pull back a good deal more than they have already. Instead, they seem to have sort of relegated the concept to the back burner, or maybe even gotten rid of it altogether. And what we were saying in our column was, this budget, it's really time to show if you're serious about that.
And you're doubtful.
Well, I admit that I am doubtful, because they did downplay the concept, and then in the most recent fiscal update, there was no reference at all to using these as indicators that it was time to get fiscal policy back on track. And this sounds like a bit of an abstract discussion. I know the numbers are so big that it can be hard to get your mind around them, but what is very much in front of people right now and top of mind is what's happened to the inflation rate. Yeah. And to me, this just shows that we have way too much money, including what the government has borrowed and spent, chasing more goods and services than the economy can actually produce. And that's why we're seeing inflation headed up towards 6%.
Yeah, plus you also, I get the sense that you also think the government is relying too much on these lagging indicators. This, the inflation number, this 5.7 number is a February number. It's almost the end of March now. Okay, well, and that 5.7 number predates $100 oil. It predates the war in Ukraine. Predates a lot of things. Who knows what the number is now? No, you talk about the unemployment rate. Why hasn't the government been looking at leading indicators, like things like consumer confidence is a leading indicator, for example? Even the market itself, financial markets are leading indicators. So anyway, I'm sorry, Mr. Robson, go ahead. Yeah. No,
you make an extremely important point there. We complained about the unemployment rate being an indicator that by the time you see it, where you said you wanted it, the momentum of the economy is going to carry it through that. The same thing is absolutely true of inflation. It is very likely to head higher. And what that means, aside from the fact that we're going, every time we go to the store or fill our cars, or all the things that you do where inflation takes you by surprise and nibbles away at the value of your dollar. If we want to get inflation back down, we need the Bank of Canada to raise interest rates, and the higher inflation goes and the more pressure there is on prices as a result of this overspending, the higher interest rates are going to go, and nobody is looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to have the Parliamentary Budget Officer on in just a few minutes' time, but I'm going to put this to him on what it might mean for the government's balance sheet, because he would probably have a better idea than I think you would. No disrespect, but I do want to get your take on this. I looked up this morning the yield on a 10-year Government of Canada bond. On March 1st, it was 1.6%. Here on March 24th, it's 2.3%. It's climbed in 24 days, 70 basis points. Now, if the Bank of Canada had hiked interest rates 70 basis points in 24 days, it'd be on the front page of every newspaper. But the bond market has priced that already.
Well,
what does that say to you about things right now, Mr. Robson?
Well, the bond market is a bit of a lagging indicator in this case, because we've had interest rates so low for so long that the bond market's taking a while to react to the higher inflation, and that happened in the 1970s as well. We've seen that before. For a while, lenders were seeing the value of the loans that they had extended eroded by inflation, and creditors were doing quite well. So it can take a little while for the bond market to catch up. But if we're seeing inflation at 6-7%, and if the central banks have stopped talking about it as transitory, but their longer-term projections are still showing it coming back down to 2% over the course of the next couple of years. If that doesn't happen, bond yields are going to go higher yet, and certainly short-term interest rates are going to go higher. So there won't be anywhere to hide in terms of borrowing short-term versus long-term. And we do not want, I'm just going to say, Canadians generally do not want to be in a situation where fiscal policy has its foot to the floor, and the Bank of Canada is holding. It also has its foot on the brake with higher interest rates. That's a very uncomfortable situation, and it's very bad for private investment. It's bad for the private sector. So we don't want to see that happening.
Okay, it's so great to have you on our show and take advantage of your insight. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. We'll talk about a cheerful topic sometime.
I hope so. Sometime.
Yeah,
sometime. Yes. That's the only problem with having you on. You're sometimes the bearer of bad news, Bill. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bill Robson is the CEO of the C.D. Howe Institute think tank. When we come back, yes, he is the PBO, Parliamentary Budget Officer Yves Giroux, on his latest crunching of the numbers on the carbon tax on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
An old-fashioned traditional grocery store. You're going to find a butcher, okay? You want a steak cut a certain way, you're going to get it. There's flour piled in the warehouse. There's mixers on the floor. There's flour on the floor. The bakery's rented out to Frank Nicolo. It's him and his son come in at night. They mix the dough, they roll the dough, and they bake the dough. It's not the traditional frozen and thaw and put it in the bin, okay? It's made from scratch 7 days a week. It's probably the only bakery left in Ottawa that does that. Then customer service. We're big on that. The cashiers, the deli. You're not, if you ask for something, they're not going to point, it's an aisle number 7. They're going to bring you there, okay? If you have too much groceries out, we'll take it out to your car. You know what I mean? There's nothing we don't do for our customers. And we evolved around our customers. They would come in and say, can you try getting me this? Can you get me this? So that's how we built the lineup we have now, okay? So we have a lot of unique items that someone that came over to live in Canada hasn't seen this particular product, but we sourced it and we have it for them, that like something they used to have as a kid. We have a lot of those unique items, a lot, from like all over the world, and we source it through distributors in Montreal and Toronto that bring in the product in bulk, and we piggyback off of them. Probably the largest European deli in Ottawa. We sell lots because people buy lots. It's nothing really complicated about that. We turn over a lot of product. We package it properly. We buy, and we're always consistent. You're always going to find, Cuddy turkey breast, San Daniel mortadella. You're always going to get the same brands. We don't flip back and forth to save 20 cents. It's always the same brands the last 29 years. Best sandwiches in town. It's simple. It starts off with fresh bread every day baked in the store. Anything that's left over goes to breadcrumbs. So you're getting a fresh bun every day that was baked probably 4 hours before you get here, okay? Not only baked, made, like, mix the flour, roll the dough, proof the bread, and bake the bread, okay? Then all the ingredients come right off the shelves. Your lettuce, your tomatoes, all your condiments, and they're cut up fresh in the deli. Not like the big, corporate restaurant chains that your lettuce comes in shredded in a bag, you open it up and you throw it in the bin. Takes, 2 or 3 days to get here from California. How long is it in the bag? The big difference is like making a sandwich at home and you don't have to do the work. It's really what the trick is, and using the freshest ingredients possible.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
There is a new report about the price on pollution, the carbon tax, the fuel surcharge, whatever it is going by. It's $40 a ton now. It is going up to $50 a ton next week. And Yves Giroux is the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and he has been looking into what $50 a ton means. And he joins me this morning here on City News. Mr. Giroux, welcome back. Yeah, really nice to hear from you. Now, in a previous report released by your office, I think it was back in 2019, you looked ahead at $50 a ton. And what the fuel surcharge, your office was calling it then, was expected to cost a middle-class family in Ontario. And I believe the figure was about $600 a year, roughly. And it went on a sliding scale, because that's how this works with the climate action incentive. Higher income households would pay more in a carbon tax. Lower income households paid less. Most families would pay about $600 a year. And your conclusion after looking at the details was that most households, by the time all is said and done, would actually come out ahead, right? And it would be, I think, it wasn't by much, by about $56 for the whole year. And the rich, the higher income households, would actually pay more in carbon tax than was rebated. And that figure was about $200 a year. They would pay about $200 a year more in carbon tax than would be rebated through the climate action incentive. Mm-hmm. So now you have new numbers out. And what do the new numbers say?
Well, we have new numbers that incorporate the increase to the carbon tax to $170 by 2030, and that's what we're focusing on because the government's plan has clearly indicated that's where the carbon tax will go to. And for the top 20% of households in Ontario, the net cost, even after accounting for the rebate, will be close to $600. And for those in the lowest income quintile, so the lowest 20%, the net gain will be about $600. But that's just looking at the carbon price that people will have to pay, the carbon tax they'll have to pay directly and indirectly, as well as the rebate, so on a net basis. So we did that to factor in a carbon tax at $170 per ton in 2030. But we also included the economic impact, which we had not done yet. So the carbon tax will have economic impacts, mostly in carbon-intensive industries. So you can think of the oil and gas sector, but also smelters, for example. So anything that needs fuel that is carbon-based will have a negative impact, presumably, unless there's a magical technological breakthrough that happens between now and 2030. So when we also take into consideration the negative impacts on the economy,
right.
So that's where...
What you call economic efficiency. Economic efficiency, right?
Well,
so
yeah.
Your report says, I have just the highlights. I haven't had a chance to read the entire report. It says when losses in economic efficiency are added to fiscal impacts of federal carbon pricing, the net carbon cost increases for all households in Ontario, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan and Alberta. These are the provinces covered by the so-called backstop, which is what we're talking about. So what does that mean? The net carbon cost increases for all households. Can you explain that a little bit more, please?
Sure. It means that those who work or who have investment income, for example, they have stocks and that return dividends and so on, because the economy will be turning at slightly lower capacity than it would be in the absence of a carbon tax. So there'll be economic disruptions. So there'll be slightly lower employment income, for at least for some individuals, and slightly lower investment income for those that have investments. So that will have a negative impact compared to a scenario where there would not be any carbon tax. So that means that economic activity will be lower than it would otherwise have been in the absence of a carbon tax. So it means that on average, households across the income spectrum will have fewer dollars in their pockets. Of course, it's an average. It doesn't mean that everybody will be worse off, but there will be some that will be worse off. And on average, it's a negative impact across the economy. Of course, that doesn't take into account technological improvements or new technologies that could be implemented, but between now and 2030, we don't think that even if these technologies were to be implemented, they'll have a material impact between now and 2030. These generally tend to have a longer time to be fully implemented and for the positive economic impacts to be felt.
Okay, interesting. Okay, we estimate, your report says, carbon pricing under the I'm calling it the Healthy Environment, Healthy Economy Climate Plan, okay, will reduce the budgetary balance. In other words, increase the budget deficit by $900 million in 2021-2022, and ultimately by $5.2 billion in 2030-2031. So this is a bit counterintuitive because carbon pricing, you would think, it's a tax, it's a revenue generating silo for the government, but it actually will increase the deficit?
Yeah, because the government has promised that all the proceeds from the carbon tax or the carbon levy will be returned to households, so the vast majority at least. So the government doesn't stand to make net gains from the carbon levy because it will be returning all that to households. So no substantial net gain for the government because what it takes in one hand, it hands out with the other hand. So, but because of the reduction in economic activity, that will generate slightly lower personal income taxes mostly. So that's where the increase in the deficit comes from. Okay. It's not the carbon tax because it's returned, but it's the lower economic activity which will weigh on the deficit.
And finally, just to repeat, because I do have to ask you about something else. The progressive nature of this remains intact even at $170 for lower income households will come out ahead. Higher income households will have a net loss. Yes? Yes.
Yep, that still remains still remains true.
All right. Your office usually looks at the impact of higher interest rates on the fiscal position of the government, with assumptions based on an increase in rates of 100 basis points. Am I right there, Mr. Giroux?
Yeah, that's the rule of thumb that we usually have.
So in the last month, interest rates, at least for a 10-year Government of Canada bond, are up 70 basis points, and they're up 130 basis points in the last year. So, but these moves in government bond yields, what will that mean for the government's fiscal position?
Well, every time you have an increase in interest rates, it means the government has to pay more on the debt that is currently on the market. So every time there's an increase in interest rates, it means slightly more money going out the door to service the existing stock of debt. So when interest rates rise, it means the government's expenditures to service that debt go up, and it means that the deficit, other things being equal, is going up. So it puts upward pressure on the deficit.
So according to your numbers, it's about 7 cents on the dollar is the debt servicing cost currently. But you say it's going to go up in the medium term to about 11 cents. What is the medium term?
The medium term is 3 to 4 years from
3 to
now.
4 years. Okay.
Yeah, when the debt, well, because the government has to refinance some of its debt on a rolling basis. So it issues 10-year bonds, it issues 3-month Treasury bills, it issues 30 days Treasury bills. So there's a variety of maturities in the government's portfolio of debt.
There was a time when it was north of 40 cents on the dollar was going to interest on the debt. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a time where...
When was that?
Mid-1990s. I think it's 93, 94, 95, around these dates, where it was 40 cents of every tax dollar collected went to pay interest on the federal debt.
My goodness. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Giroux. Very insightful as always. Great to have you on the program. Bye-bye. That is Yves Giroux, the Parliamentary Budget Officer. Coming up next, the war in Ukraine. We'll speak about it with Elliot Tepper, Professor of International Affairs at Carleton University on The Rob Snow Show. This is City News.
There we go.
Hey, going back in, okay?
It's a new season of The New Fly Fisher on Rogers TV.
I love to make abundance boards. And why do I call them abundance boards? Because they're an abundance of all the things that you love together. There's no rhyme or reason, there's no rules. It's literally about taking a whole bunch of different ingredients and making them into something that you love, that you can snack on. Maybe curl up on the couch and have a snack night. Charcuterie is all about a meat plate. And antipasti is all about a little bit of meat, a little bit of fruit, and a little bit of snack that you might have at the beginning of a meal, like an appetizer. I like to take all of these concepts and kind of mesh them together. It's kind of like a work of art because you're creating something delicious, but you're also creating something that looks super fancy, like from a gourmet style restaurant, but just using simple things you have.
Ottawa is a very political city, and it's not just political with the people in Parliament. You got street politics, you got business politics, you got basketball politics, and if you don't know how to navigate the systems, you get left behind. I did. They thought I went crazy. They thought I was dead. I was. But it's never too late to heal, to rebuild, to reinvent yourself. Prezi.
One for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 24th of March. Good morning, I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa, light rain and 3 degrees. It's 5 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. Ottawa's acting police chief is appearing virtually before a parliamentary committee on the downtown occupation. Steve Bell says the initial strategy of police was to negotiate with the so-called Freedom Convoy to end it, but he admits that didn't work. He acknowledges there were clear signs of hate that shook confidence in the police. An uphill battle for a 13-year-old girl still recovering from a hit and run more than a month ago. Serena Summers was struck near Meadowlands and Fisher the day before Valentine's Day. She is still in hospital. Her mother says she's running a fever today, keeping her in hospital longer than expected. Police are still searching for a newer model, smaller, dark-colored sedan, possibly blue, that fled after hitting the girl. Ridership levels still way down at OC Transpo. The transit budget had hoped ridership this year would get back up to 82% of pre-pandemic levels. Right now, the chair of the Transit Commission estimates it's around 30 to 50%. Allan, Hubley pins that on the lack of public servants working in the office and taking transit. A debit and credit problem on OC Transpo this morning is now resolved. Ticket machines were not taking payments by debit or credit cards, but the transit service says all of its ticket machines are now working again. City News Time, 11:33. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Professor Elliot Tepper is with us every week, Distinguished Senior Fellow, Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. He helps us try and make sense of this complicated world. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Rob.
The big international news story of the day is the NATO leaders meeting in Brussels. According to the statement issued by NATO, they will address the consequences of President Putin's invasion of Ukraine, discuss the role of China in this crisis, and decide the next steps to strengthen NATO's deterrence and defense. So maybe we can go through these step by step.
Sure.
Consequences.
Well, standing back just half a step for the moment, I think what we're seeing in front of us right now is really the cementing of the construction of the new Europe. It's not just maybe the New World Order as well. It isn't just NATO. There are actually three simultaneous summits, one after the other. Joe Biden is involved in all of them. NATO is meeting, but so is the G7, the leading industrialized countries of the world, and the EU, the Council of Europe, where Prime Minister Trudeau spoke, I guess, yesterday. So this is an overlapping group of memberships because some states are not members of NATO, but they are of the EU and vice versa. So this is really the bringing together of a unified voice to deal with the crisis. And the crisis, of course, is Russia having decided to invade a neighboring state and to demolish it. So the consequences then are these. At a minimum, Russia is being put on notice through the pronouncements already made. There's going to be more sanctions. The already tight sanctions regime, actually unprecedented sanctions regime, is going to be tightened around the edges. More oligarchs and their families are going to be covered and so forth. But also, because NATO is the kind of pointy end of the spear of all this. The EU is not a military organization. It's an economic and social and cultural organization, but the EU is overtly a military organization, and there's going to be a doubling of the strength around Russia of the NATO presence. Canada, of course, is part of NATO. Okay. So there's going to be, in terms of immediate consequences, Russia's being made much more of a pariah state even than before by the unified voice of an increasingly unified Europe.
Discussing the role of China in the crisis, what has been the role of China in this crisis?
Now we're in for a longer conversation.
Okay.
The role of China here is very interesting. The U.S. president took the initiative on March 18th, I think, to call Xi Jinping. So Biden and Xi Jinping, and remember they know each other, they go back a long way together, had a long and almost 2-hour tough conversation. So China has now been put on notice by the meetings we're talking about now and earlier by President Biden. Do not provide military aid or sanctions relief, that is, a sanctions off back door to what's going on. Russia is going to be made a pariah state, and China, are not going to get in the way of that. You're not going to help them. What hasn't been noticed as much is there's yet another summit. The next summit, and this is noticed in Asia, looking back toward the EU instead of the other way around, is that April 1st, just after our show next week.
Yep.
There's going to be an EU-China summit. So they are going to sit down together, and it's already been pointed out that China does 10 times the business with the EU and with the U.S. as it does with Russia. So right up front, there's an economic motive. China is facing its partners or its competitors, and that's kind of the choice that's being put to China. China has been told to keep your distance, as quote, and so far China has done so, said Jake Sullivan. We've not actually seen and don't have evidence of actual provision of military equipment, but it's much broader than that. The head of the European Parliament's largest bloc said China now faces a choice, I'm paraphrasing, they can sit with us or they can sit with a war criminal. So the pressure on China is growing, and we can talk a lot more about China, but in the immediate context.
Well, yeah, I would like to. I would like to, actually. And
Sure.
we have some lots of time here.
Okay.
Because it seems to me the Biden administration is warning China of consequences if it supports Russia in the war. Right. So it seems to be a decision time for the leadership there to decide what relationship is more important to China. Is it China's relationship with the United States, or is it China's relationship with Russia? Just being an observer, it would seem to me that China's relationship with the United States, even though they are rivals, would seem to be much more important than its relationship with Russia, because despite the many differences between the United States and China and the rivalry of those two superpowers, their economies are greatly integrated and related. There's a tremendous economic relationship there. What do you think, Professor?
And it's with the whole world. It isn't merely with the U.S., but certainly starts with the U.S. Well, I think China, sitting where they are and looking at what's been happening with Xi Jinping, is getting mixed messages. Remember, on February 4th, at the start of the Olympics, Mr. Putin actually left his isolation and went to Beijing and talked to Xi Jinping, who's also largely isolated because of the coronavirus. So they are two very cautious leaders in terms of health, but they met and issued that very long statement together that they have a friendship, that an alliance that has no limits, and went on and on about lots of things in it. We talked about that, I think, at the time. So I think China sits there and says, okay, what lessons are we going to... We're at the 1-month anniversary of this invasion, right? So what lessons is China drawing? Well, they're not going to call it an invasion. They are echoing and therefore supporting the Russian position. But on the one hand, if you stand back from it a bit, Mr. Putin has handed China a huge gift. The world was coalescing against China, not against Russia. The security architecture was being increased in the South China Sea in particular, and moves were being made to push back against aggressive wolf warrior diplomacy. We had our own issue with the two Michaels. The reputational impact on China has been of their aggressive behavior in Hong Kong and Xinjiang and, of course, Tibet before that. All of that was coming down home to roost. It was coming to the point where they were saying, we want to be leaders, and a lot of states were saying, we're not sure we want you in your current manifestation to be a leader. So now they're getting a mixed message as a result of the invasion from Putin. Now nobody's paying much attention to the role of China. So the coalescing of force right now is against Mr. Putin and not against China. So on the one hand, they see that as a great gift. It's a great distraction. Now, if Mr. Putin wins his gamble and he succeeds in incorporating Ukraine and then probably Moldova and certainly Belarus into a new sphere of influence with much more geopolitical strategic impact, well, that's a win because, China has been backing them. This is a win of autocracy against democracy. It works well for them. But if he loses, then what does that mean for Mr. Xi Jinping and his leadership? It's another great win for him because Russia becomes increasingly a diminished power, increasingly dependent on China. And Russia is a huge treasure house, not only for oil and gas and coal, but all kinds of mineral wealth. So China, in its emergence, will have found that they no longer are saying, well, there's several superpowers. There's only two, the U.S. and China, because Russia's removed. So on the one hand, I think they're seeing that kind of a view, but there's another side to it of all that. We talked a bit about this before. China also now sees suddenly that an alliance can be put together in 8 days that can crush the Russian economy. And as we just talked about, China is a much bigger player in the global economy.
Oh, yes.
So do they want that? We also see and this bothers me the most, I think, of all the things we're talking about, the whole question of nuclear weapons. What are they taking away from the current situation? Is that Russia rattles it's fascinating metaphors here, rattling their saber, but it's a nuclear saber. So what does China take from that? They are a big nuclear power. They're modernizing their nuclear weapons. Do they say, well, we can do the same thing? If anybody bothers us, for example, if we want to move in on Taiwan, we can just say, don't do it. We've got a nuclear weapon on our side. And is that going to work for them? But they also see, in the case of Ukraine, a mass popular uprising against an occupying power. Will that make them think twice about Ukraine? Do they really want a people's movement? And this was part of the February 4th announcement between the two autocratic dictatorial powers. We don't want color revolutions. We don't want people's movements against the power that be against the state. So China is not. China doesn't have a single clear role to play. I think they're observing it very carefully, and probably the next few days will be something like a matter of decision, because, just go back to where your question, when the EU-China summit happens, what will be the message and what will be the response?
Okay. So, finally, here in our first half, next steps to strengthen NATO's deterrence and defense, what could those look like? What's been announced is that
NATO is dramatically increasing its strength in the states around, next to, abutting, in the neighborhood of Russia. So that Russia, and Mr. Biden has been quite clear on this, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. So if you keep firing your missiles, for example, at the border near Poland, what happens if it goes in? But right now what's being said is that the pointy end of the stick, the military side of all this, NATO is really going to enhance it very, very significantly. But the other side of that, to me, Rob, is that it's also an announcement that Ukraine continues to fight alone. Yes. There's not going to be any NATO boots on the ground. There will, however, be enhanced weaponry going in under basically not NATO not officially NATO, but NATO states will be providing much enhanced military force to Ukraine to carry on this battle alone.
And if I recall in previous conversations, a greatly enhanced force on NATO territory. You had wished they had done that earlier, I believe.
Well, my point on that was that the decision on what to do about Ukraine was made a long time ago, before the Russian buildup. Had there been an Operation Reassurance, de facto, not in an official way, but de facto, the Operation Reassurance, which we are part of, is the NATO forces, the NATO countries in the Baltics have had tripwire forces put there. That is, Canada and Germany and other countries have forces all across the Baltic saying, we know that we couldn't stop an invasion by a mighty Russian army, but you'd have to cross over our bodies to get there, and that would invoke NATO. Had that kind of reassurance been put across Ukraine before the buildup, the shoe would have been on the other foot. Then Mr. Putin would have seen, look, there's, let's say, 8,000 U.S. troops and another couple thousand UK troops, another nuclear power NATO member, and maybe some Canadian troops at all these military installations that the Russians took out in the very first 24 hours or 48 hours. Would they have built up their forces? Would they have wanted to roll over NATO forces had they been in place before the decision was made to build up this force and then invade?
Okay. We'll be right back with the world. Professor Elliot Tepper is with us, distinguished senior fellow at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Well, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, we've been in the city for over 50 years, supporting youth between the ages of 6 and 24 and providing these amazing relationships, these amazing mentoring relationships to them. And, what I've seen, I've been with the organization 10 years, and in my 10 years, I've seen some transformational life-changing relationships that, youth that have been meeting with their mentors from the age of 6, who go on to be meeting with them until they're 18 plus, who are now, some of them are graduating from university, some are going to their mentors' weddings, being part of the family and being there when they have additional siblings, etc. So it's just an amazing thing to watch, that it's life-changing and life-lasting.
Yeah, and you're always looking for new initiatives. I think most organizations are, and even pre-pandemic, always looking at something new and interesting, ways to raise funds, raise awareness. And you have a new one called Thrive. Tell us about it.
Right. So Thrive actually started as our Clothes for Kids' Sake program. In 2016, we were trying to find new ways to raise dollars to support our mentoring programs. And we started off with some clothing bins in 2016, and then partnered with the Ottawa Catholic School Board, in which they allowed us to put new bins across the city. And so we've been collecting clothes since 2016, and we're just over the £1 million mark of how many clothes we've actually collected.
Wow.
And yeah, amazing. An amazing partnership with the Catholic School Board. And that was phase 1. And we collect gently used clothing. We don't collect anything else.
Right.
In phase 2, we really wanted to collect, we wanted to move into potentially a retail location. And in 2020, obviously things didn't happen. COVID occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't able to open up a store, but we opened up a thrift store. And Thrive Thrift Select is where you can go and buy gently used clothing online. And we have items for young people, items for adults, items for infants, and we ship Canada Post, or you can come and pick it up at our location right now at Confederation High School in Ottawa, which is where our offices are. But really the goal is we're doing two things, right? We are providing support to our youth in Ottawa, because the dollars we raise come right back into our programs, to our mentoring programs. And the second piece is we're helping the environment. Keeping £1 million of clothes out of landfills has been really significant. And also being able to bring these dollars back in to be able to create our mentoring programs and provide these opportunities for our youth.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So we're back with Professor Elliot Tepper for his segment that we call The World with Professor Elliot Tepper. He is Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University, with us every Thursday. So according to NATO figures, 7,000 to 15,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in 4 weeks of war in Ukraine. By way of comparison, Russia lost 15,000 troops over 10 years in Afghanistan.
Yes.
What do you think of those figures?
Well, let's a final comment on NATO before we move on.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the things being put on the agenda that has not been on the agenda until now, and it's a frightening thing, is that Russia may turn to weapons of mass destruction, biological, chemical, radiological, and tactical nuclear weapons, if their war continues to go badly for them. So that has now become an overt discussion among NATO allies, and of course all the other summits will then take note of it. So I think we have to pay attention to that as we move forward. In terms of the casualties, one of the assumptions that's settling in right now, and I'm not sure I share it, is that this war is now a stalemate, that Russia has so overestimated their abilities to have a blitzkrieg, taking out of Kiev immediately, and then replacing the government with a puppet government, and then, taking over the country basically that way, and then incorporating Ukraine into the greater Russian sphere. That hasn't happened. That's why there's concern now that the Russians will turn to other means. The Ukrainians have announced that the Russians are losing 1,000 people a day, and we're at the 1 month mark, and that 1,000 includes dead and injured. So it's not merely how many do they kill, but how many are injured and taken off the field. These are the Western intelligence estimate says, quote, at least 7,000 Russians have been killed and as many 20,000 injured. one of the things that has not gotten a lot of attention, but has some, is that, well, Russia can't possibly win because it's a stalemate. They don't have enough troops that they can draw on to encircle Kiev and then occupy the whole country when the country, in fact, is going to settle into an insurgency based on that stalemate. Those assumptions may be correct, but there's also the possibility in any war that what we see today on the ground isn't going to last. The Russians have been noted very quietly as calling on the Wagner group, their semi-official group of mercenaries, but also accepting mercenaries basically drawn from Russian activity in Syria. So the Syrians, there's Syrian militias there, and that they will volunteer. They'll be paid to come in, and that will augment the total number of Russian troops available on the ground to carry out this assault. What hasn't been emphasized enough is another dimension of those troops, Rob, is that, like the Chechens, they don't have any hesitation to be killing Ukrainian troops, whereas the Russians are relying on transcripts, young boys in many cases,
right,
to come in and kill people that they don't want to. There's talk of mass defections. There's talk of the Ukrainians are providing these boys with cell phones to call their mothers to come pick them up. So there's a lot going on that in all this about how many troops, who has what, and what can be done next.
All right. We have about 2 minutes left, and I would like your take on the legacy of Madeleine Albright, the first female U.S. Secretary of State. Helped steer Western foreign policy in the aftermath of the Cold War. She was 84 years old, has passed away of cancer. Your thoughts on her career, please?
Well, she stood out. I mean, she had a sparkle to her. The term regal has been used. When she came into a room, it transformed the room. She had a way to mix civility with toughness, which is a rare combination, and effectiveness as a result. She can reach across the aisle politically. She could reach to across the table with people she's negotiating with and establish personal contact with them. She supported the expansion of NATO into the former Soviet Union republics that we've been talking about. But I think one of the interesting things about her is, and I'm possibly paraphrasing, but one of her lasting legacies is the comment that democracies are the most stable form of long-term government, but in the short term, they are fragile. And that's maybe a lesson we need to really ponder at home and abroad as we are facing this Russian invasion, plus the weakening of the West prior to that. So I think the idea that she is leaving behind in that regard is well worth taking with us.
Thank you for this week. As always, Professor Tepper, great to have your insight.
Oh, it's good to talk to you. It'd be nice if we had something more pleasant, but
yes.
always good to have this conversation
Thank
with you, Rob.
Professor Elliot Tepper, Distinguished Senior Fellow, Norman Patterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. That's it for the Rob Snow Show. We're back tomorrow right after the 9 o'clock news during the Talkback Hour tomorrow. It's the Friday free-for-all, and that's always an adventure. Hope to hear from you at 750-1310 tomorrow. The Sam LaPrade Show is coming up right after our noon news update. This is City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Tune in weekdays starting at 9 on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
This program is brought to you by OHL Action.